It was from the Cataclysm. I can illuminate the technological tree. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 126 Xuan Vex. Although he said so, Lu Yongchang knew in his heart that such a major matter still had to be decided by the chairman of the council. At least, before we truly leave the earth, national interests always come first. Then more than an hour later in the office within the first ring road of Beijing, hiss. The old man put down the teacup in his hand and glanced at Lu Yongchang at the desk with a frown. Yongchang, what do you think? Facing the chairman of the parliament, Lu Yongchang naturally could not say the dirty words like before. He pondered for a moment and organized some words in his mind. Sir, I think we need to go on this rescue mission. Counselor. Li raised his eyebrows slightly and took a sip of the tea in his hand. Oh, is it okay even if I fall out with the United States over this? Lu Yongchang's eyes flashed and he nodded firmly. Not bad. The office returned to silence again, with only the sound of the old man drinking tea remaining. A long time. Tell me the reason. The old man put down the teacup again, and the look in his eyes became sharp. I need a reason. Lu Yongchang glanced at the calendar on his desk. 2031.10.12. It's been a year. Lu Yongchang did not directly answer the old man's words, but sighed softly. The old man frowned slightly. A year. The next second, a flash of realization appeared in the old man's eyes. You mean, the sun still has 14 years left? Lu Yongchang nodded and shook his head. The old man was a little puzzled by Lu Yongchang's reaction. But the next moment, Lu Yongchang opened his mouth to answer the old man's doubts. Senior Counselor, based on the mathematical model of the sun's evolution that I established at that time, I estimate that the sun is about to undergo major changes. It is estimated that in a few days, the problem with the sun will also be discovered in the West. Counselor. Li's expression changed slightly. So fast. Facing the old man's sigh, Lu Yongchang showed a somewhat bitter smile on his face. Is it fast? Not really fast. According to the progress of the previous life, this is actually the 6th year since the sun changed. So, what you mean is, Counselor. Li looked at Lu Yongchang in front of him solemnly and asked in a low voice. Lu Yongchang took a deep breath and uttered a sentence. Sir, I think it's time for humanity to unite. Even Congressman Li's expression changed drastically when he heard Lu Yongchang's words, but soon, the old man calmed down the emotions on his face. His eyes flickered slightly, and his fingers tapped lightly on the desk in front of him. From the old man's macro expression, Lu Yongchang could see his confusion and panic. Human unity. These 4 words may seem simple, but they are indeed extremely difficult to implement. Since the emergence of great apes, the entire development history of human civilization has basically been a history of vast wars, not to mention the whole world. Even the Xia kingdom itself was still in a stage of war and chaos a few hundred years ago. Yongchang. The speaker's voice was a bit difficult. Isn't it too early to say this now? We currently don't have the strength to convince everyone. Lu Yongchang showed a bit of a smile on his face. President, if you are worried about this, I can assure you that we now have the absolute right to speak. As he spoke, he took out a document from the briefcase beside him and handed it into the old man's hand. Senior Counselor, this is an improvement plan for Xuan number 1 from the laboratory. You can take a look. The chairman frowned and took the document. Xuan number 1 improvement plan? Is there anything bad about the current Xuan number 1? As he spoke, the speaker gently opened the first page of the document. Senior Counselor, this improvement plan is in the military direction. We named it Xuan Vex. As Lu Yongchang finished speaking, a high-definition concept picture came into view of the chairman. A fighter jet with forward-swept wings and a grey-white body. This is looking at the beautiful and light aircraft. The old man's breathing suddenly became rapid, and a touch of excitement quietly rose in his eyes. As we all know, the combat effectiveness of a fighter jet is directly proportional to its appearance. Sir, according to the design, this is a variable wing fighter. Among The forward swept main wings can be folded to better perform extraterrestrial space combat missions. As for the atmosphere, because the cockpit and cabin space are greatly reduced, this model of Zhuan fighter can have a higher speed and can carry more than 20 missiles, in addition to ordinary missiles. Considering that it is equipped with a second-generation fusion reactor, we have installed a high-power laser rapid-fire cannon on it. The chairman of the council stared blankly at the documents in front of him, feeling a little restless for a moment. After a long time, he spoke softly. Yongchang, can we manufacture this Zhuan Vex fighter now? After speaking, the chairman looked at Yongchang expectantly. He doesn't want to hear that this aircraft is still just a concept product. Yongchang chuckled. President, if you agree, within 3 days, the first Zhuan Vex can appear in the Zero Control Factory. Hiss. The chairman of the parliament gasped suddenly. You let me think about it. After speaking, the congressman took a deep breath to calm down his inner agitation. After a few minutes, Congressman Lee opened his eyes suddenly, and a terrifying light flashed across him. But in that case, let's start the plan you mentioned. By the way, how many of this Zhuan Vex are you going to build? Yongchang was stunned and asked. 20, so few. The counselor frowned and whispered, is 20 enough? Yongchang smiled bitterly and shook his head. President, I even think that 20 is too many. Zhuan Vex's main combat platform is within the atmosphere. This thing can only be used now. What's more, if something really happens, academician Ko Liang speculates that only 3 to 5 Zhuan Vexes equipped with nuclear warheads can destroy a country. The congressman took a long breath and suffocated. In this case, then let's do 20 fights as you said. Yongchang nodded. There is one more thing, President. We can consider announcing this rescue plan. The old man smiled and nodded. Don't worry, I know this well. P.S. Thanks to the boss of 10th Art for sending me a bunch of reminder charms. I'll add another chapter today. P.P.S. I really don't have a drop left. Chapter 127 Pathfinder. Here we come. Mars Bayixuan sat in the main driver's seat, looking at the radio equipment in front of him boredly. Do you think Professor Lu will let us go to rescue them? Zah. One eye frowned slightly. Not necessarily. This matter is not up to Professor Lu. After all, this has already involved the United States, and the specifics depend on what the Speaker of the Senate thinks. Hearing this, Hang Fan showed a trace of reluctance in his eyes. But if we don't rescue them, Yik said inside slightly, his eyes full of melancholy. This depends on our Professor Lu. As a spaceman, I also hope to save them. Just as Bayixuan was about to change to a more comfortable sitting position, the radio equipment suddenly rang. A familiar electric current sound rang. Bayixuan sat up suddenly from the chair, looking at the radio equipment in front of him with burning eyes. Call Zhuan 2. Call Zhuan 2. Start the rescue mission immediately. Repeat. Start the rescue mission immediately. LV. Yongchang's voice was slightly distorted, but in the ears of the 3 astronauts, it was like the sound of nature. Bayixuan's eyes were a little excited, and he stretched out his hand, and clenched his fist, and waved it vigorously in the air. Everyone, let's get ready. The bottom of the ZHZ-72 crater. The sun shines through the slightly turbid Martian atmosphere and shines on the bottom of the crater full of drilling holes. A dark black spaceship slowly closes the open doors on both sides. The next moment, several blue flames appear at its bottom, pushing Zhuan 2 to slowly rise into the air. Pathfinder, please reply. Yixin adjusted the radio frequency band with a slightly excited spirit, and called to the Pathfinder Mars cabin more than 1,000 meters away. We are here, Pathfinder. Return cabin. The atmosphere is very depressing. The 3 astronauts sat in their seats with melancholy faces. Andrew sighed deeply, and looked up at the time again. 2 hours have passed. Will they come to rescue us? Bruno shook his head in frustration. Probably not. You can tell from their attitude towards us from the beginning. The gap between countries is destined not to be solved so easily. Hearing this, Joe also sighed deeply. At the beginning, the 3 of them still had great hope. But as time passed, everyone's hope was wiped out. If After a moment of silence, Bruno took a deep breath. If they don't come to rescue us, what should we do? No. Response point, but there was a bit of death in the eyes of the three. Shh, Pathfinder, please reply. We have arrived above the Mars cabin. Repeat, we have arrived above the Mars cabin. The three astronauts raised their heads suddenly, and ecstasy rose in the depths of their eyes. The voice of the speaker sounded familiar. If they remembered correctly, it should be the astronaut who threatened them not long ago. But now, the originally annoying voice sounded like heavenly music in the ears of the three astronauts. Andrew reached out and grabbed the microphone in front of him, his voice trembling slightly, and even mixed with a bit of crying. Thank you, as he said. Andrew covered his face with his hands, and hot tears rolled down his cheeks. Shh. A burst of electric current sounded. You're welcome. Xiago will never give up any human being. The moment he heard this, the tears in Andrew and the other two's eyes became hotter and hotter. They never thought that in the desperate moment, it was Xiago on the other side who extended a helping hand. Thank you, Andrew didn't know what to say, so he could only hold the microphone tightly and keep thanking him. A few minutes later, the emotions of the three gradually stabilized. What should we do? Andrew wiped his tears and said with a sob. Soon, a response came from the radio. Just come out directly. We will land immediately. Hearing the words on the radio, the three astronauts hurriedly put on their spacesuit helmets, passed through the slightly narrow corridor, and got into the airlock inside the return capsule. The door of the Pathfinder return capsule slowly opened. Andrew got out of the return capsule first. He stared blankly at the front. He could swear that he would never forget this shocking scene in his life. I saw a huge black spaceship with a faint blue flame at the bottom, slowly landing on the open space dozens of meters away from them. Although the spaceship it has a rectangular structure, but it is full of strange beauty. At the same time, under the force of the engine tail flame, the dry Martian ground raised countless red Martian dust. The Martian dust flew all over the sky, dyeing the originally slightly turbid air red. Red, dark blue, and dark black, the three tones blended perfectly in front of him, forming a beautiful and shocking picture. In the picture, a bright red flag was deeply imprinted in their hearts. Jesus, Bruno's exclamation came from the radio. Obviously, Andrew's two teammates were also shocked by the shocking scene in front of them. The three stood in front of the return capsule in a daze. Oh my god, is this really the technology that humans have? Joey muttered to himself. As soon as the voice fell, a stream of air spurted out from the side of Zhuan, stirring up a cloud of Martian dust. Then, the hatch on the side of Zhuan slowly opened. Three figures wearing silver white spacesuits appeared in front of everyone. Andrew's eyes moved slightly. He quickly noticed a problem. Zaya's spacesuits are at least several times lighter than the ones they wear. If the US spacesuit looks like a 400-pound fat man, Zaya's spacesuit is a 120-pound normal person. Hello. Watching the three astronauts from Zaya approaching slowly, Andrew swallowed slightly, nodded slightly, and greeted them through the radio. Hello, we are here to carry out the rescue mission. As they spoke, Bayexan and the other two stood up straight and saluted in unison. Seeing this, Andrew and the other two hurriedly returned a not so standard salute, and then bowed to Bayexan and the other two. Thank you. What's the use of thanking? It would be better to open the data license for the Mars cabin. Han Fan curled his lips and said in a low voice. But he obviously forgot that the current radio channel was not the team's voice. Bayexan's mouth twitched suddenly, and he shouted in a low voice, Han Fan, what are you talking about? He turned his head and glared at Han Fan, and was glad in his heart. Fortunately, Han Fan spoke in Chinese just now. Otherwise, just now, you said you wanted the data license for the Mars cabin, right? Chapter 128 Data Licensing. Do you want a black box? Just now, you said you wanted the data license for the Mars cabin, right? Bruno's slightly puzzled voice came from the radio. I have learned Chinese by myself, and the sentence just now should be this meaning, right? For a moment, the radio channel fell into silence. The atmosphere gradually became awkward. Ahem. Bayexan's eyes twitched violently, and he coughed hard. You heard it wrong. Just now, Bruno's voice sounded again. If you can use our data, I will open the license to you now. Puff. Cough cough cough. This time, not only Bai Yixun, but also Han Fan and Zai Yu were choked by their own saliva. Are you serious? Bai Yixun looked at Bruno in front of him with a strange face. This thing should not be given casually, right? Bruno shrugged. Yes, according to the regulations, it is true. But who cares? Since the United States has given up on us, we don't need to abide by its so-called regulations, right? Bai Yixun's eyes moved slightly. He noticed that in Bruno's words just now, the pronoun for the United States was changed to it. According to common sense, people usually refer to their own country as she. A few sighs flashed through his mind. It seems that the behavior of the United States this time has completely broken the hearts of the 3 astronauts. If possible, it would be best to have these data. Bai Yixun chuckled and nodded. But don't force it. Bruno turned his head to look at Andrew. Captain, what do you think? Andrew pondered for a moment and nodded slowly. Do you want the black box? I know where the black box is. Bai Yixun, Han Fan, Zai. Seeing that Bai Yixun and the other 2 did not reply, Andrew shrugged lightly. I'll take it as your consent. There are also some drilling data and various experimental data. I can give them to you. While speaking, Andrew turned and walked towards the Mars cabin next to him. If you want to see the internal structure, you are welcome to visit. Looking at Andrew's back, Bai Yixun looked at his teammates with a strange face. Then he quietly tuned the radio to the team channel. You recorded it. Don't talk yet. Tune the channel. Seeing Han Fan about to open his mouth to speak, Bai Yixun broke out in cold sweat on his back and quickly stopped him. Han Fan was slightly stunned, smiled awkwardly and operated on the watch. Ahem. Captain, don't worry. I've been recording since before takeoff. Bai Yixun breathed a sigh of relief. Keep recording. It's just right. Let's go see what the US Mars cabin looks like. After that, Bai Yixun took the lead and followed Andrew to the Mars cabin. By the way, Andrew turned around abruptly and looked at Bai Yixun with burning eyes. What's wrong? If can we apply to join our country? Bai Yixun was stunned in place. After a long time, he slowly exhaled a turbid breath. I can't make the decision on this. I need to report to my superiors. Looking at Bai Yixun's serious expression, Andrew nodded gently. If you can help us apply for it. Seemingly noticing the doubts in the eyes of Bai Yixun and the other 2, Andrew's eyes flashed with bitterness. From the moment you saved us, we can't go back to the United States. Even if we go back, I guess it won't end well. The next day. A video was quietly posted on the homepage of the official website of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of our country. Because there was no special description, few people clicked into the video. However, with a population of 1.4 billion in our country, there would always be a few idle netizens. Lu Renbing, a college student. Although school had already started, because it was not the final week yet and there were few courses this semester, Lu Renbing huddled in his dorm and casually flipped through various apps on his phone, trying to find some fun in his boring life. Suddenly, by chance, he accidentally clicked into the official website of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of our country. Looking at the video without any description on the homepage, his eyebrows suddenly raised. There are melons. This was his unique intuition as a wildebeest who had been wandering around in melon fields for many years. His breathing was slightly faster, and his finger quickly pointed to the video. The video started playing. Pathfinder, please reply if you received it. As the voice sounded, a slightly sci-fi scene appeared in Lu Renbing's eyes. He was stunned. The next moment, he reacted. This should be the real shot of Zuan second on Mars. His eyes lit up instantly. Wow. It's an alien melon. The video was edited and matched with background music. When Bai Yixun's voice "We have arrived above the Mars cabin" sounded in the video, Lu Renbing couldn't help holding his breath. Although it was not clear what happened, such a scene made him full of expectations. The next moment, a cry-infused English voice came. Thank you, Lu Rinbing suddenly froze in place. What happened on Mars? But why didn't he hear any news from the United States? As the video progressed, he gradually figured out the whole process. It turned out that the US Mars capsule and the return capsule had problems at the same time. When he heard that the US had abandoned 3 astronauts and blocked the news, Lu Rinbing's eyes flashed with anger. These are 3 lives, as the 3 US astronauts bowed to the camera to thank them. The video ended. Lu Rinbing took a deep breath. The video was not long, but he felt like he had watched a science fiction blockbuster. He didn't think too much, just copied the URL and posted it to the Penguin Group and Campus Forum. Shock. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs official website actually released such a video. Most college students at this time were bored. The moment they saw this title, these college students cursed the title party while honestly reaching out and clicking on the link. The speed of public opinion fermentation was very exaggerated. In just a few hours, the #1 hot search on Weibo was quietly replaced. Mars Rescue. The 4 big red and black characters attracted the attention of all netizens. What the hell? Something happened to the US Mars capsule. Wow. The last BGM is so exciting, coupled with the sentence Zygoe will never give up any human being. I love it. So, where is the US response? Will they say this is fake news again? Eat melon. JPG. It is estimated that these 3 astronauts will never work for NASA in their lives. The psychological shadow is maximum. Don't talk about the psychological shadow. This is simply a circle around the gates of hell. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 129 Fungal Samples Detected. Beijing. Inside the first ring line. The chairman frowned and looked at LV Yongchang in front of him. You mean those 3 astronauts want to join Zygoe? LV Yongchang nodded slightly and added, and they took the initiative to provide various data of the Mars cabin. Even LV Yongchang's expression became strange. They even found the black box. Chairman. The chairman stretched out his hand and gently rubbed his eyebrows. Wait, this amount of information is a bit too much. After a brief thought, the chairman frowned and said, you mean they use NASA's Mars cabin data as a token of their loyalty? LV Yongchang shrugged. That's roughly the reason. Although it sounds a bit unbelievable. I thought about it, but after further investigation, it makes sense. After all, they can't go back to the United States. In the US archives, they are almost dead. The chairman looked at Lu Yongchang with a deep look and did not express his own opinion, but asked Lu Yongchang, what do you think? Me. Lu Yongchang was stunned and said without thinking, of course we accept them. Talents of this level will be of great help to the future of Zygoe. But what if they are spies? The chairman said meaningfully, there are many such things in history. Hearing the chairman's reminder, Lu Yongchang's mouth corners slightly raised. Speaker, don't forget that with zero, even spies can't make any waves. Speaker. Lee was startled. Then he clapped his hands and laughed. Not bad, not bad. This man is old, and his memory has declined. Some time ago, with the help of Zero, I caught a lot of spies, but I forgot them in a blink of an eye. Speaking of this, Senator Lee suddenly changed the subject. Yongchang, remember, whether it is now or in the future, you must think about problems comprehensively. Only in this way can you lead Zygoe to long-term development. LV Yongchang's heart trembled slightly. These words, he didn't dare to think too much, just nodded gently. Speaker, don't worry. By the way, how is the mission of Zuan second going? The speaker took off his glasses and pinched his eyebrows, his wrinkled face full of fatigue. There is no progress yet. A trace of helplessness flashed across LV Yongchang's face. This thing depends on luck, and there is no use in being anxious. Where are those American astronauts? The speaker said worriedly. Won't it leak our research on Mars? LV Yongchang shrugged. Let them see. After all, they are also doing this research themselves. Hiding it will only make people more suspicious. The Chairman of the Parliament pondered for a moment and nodded slowly. That's all we can do. Mars ZHZ72. Crater 1IE. Remember to check this sample. Hang. Fan took a deep step and a shallow step and sent a drilling sample to Zia 1IE, who was standing next to the cabin point like Hang Fan. Zia 1IE's face was full of fatigue at this time point. She looked at the flashing red light on the detector expressionlessly, mechanically cleaned the previous sample, and mechanically processed the sample that Hang Fan had just sent, and put it on the detector. Beep. Beep. A reminder sounded different from the past point. As the reminder sounded, the indicator light began to flash green. Zia 1IE suddenly stopped her cleaning action. She carefully looked at the monitor beside her. Fungus. Samples detected. A line of simple Chinese characters filled her eyes with excitement. Captain, found it. We found it. Zia 1IE's voice rang out over the team's radio. At this time, Baixuan and Hang Fan were preparing to move the drilling machine to the next drilling point. After hearing this slightly hoarse shout, the two of them could not help but stand there in a daze. With trembling hands, Baixuan slowly placed the drilling machine in his hand on the dusty ground, then suddenly stood up and ran quickly towards Zuan number 2. Seeing the flashing green indicator light, Baixuan couldn't help but hold his breath, fearing that he would blow away the fungus sample that was still unknown. But soon, he realized that this was completely unnecessary worry. Not to mention that the helmet on his head perfectly isolated his breath. Even the several centimeters of dark brown objects placed on the detector could not be blown away in one breath. In the red Martian soil, there were a lot of white objects. Those are ice cubes under the Utopia plane. In addition to the red and white colors, there are dots of dark brown objects in the samples on the detector. Because of the contrast of colors, these dark brown objects are particularly conspicuous. Baixuan subconsciously glanced at the text on the detector. Fungus, he whispered. It's actually fungus. As he said that, he reached out and gently grabbed a dark brown object and looked at it carefully through the helmet. The fungus was curled all over, and the surface was covered with layers of wrinkles. Even with the naked eye, it can be seen that it is seriously lacking in water. Be careful. Zia 1IE's tone was full of worry. This is a real alien creature, and our bodies don't have any corresponding antibodies. Hearing the reminder, Baixuan's face became a little more serious. Don't worry, I know. Before entering Zuan 2nd, everyone must undergo a comprehensive disinfection. While speaking, Baixuan turned his head and walked towards the drilling hole just now. What are you going to do? Zia 1IE asked subconsciously. Baixuan didn't look back, but whispered on the radio channel. These samples are definitely not enough at the moment. Hang Fan and I will drill this area a few more times and try to find more samples. Earth. It was 1:25 in the middle of the night in Xiaguo time. LV Yongchang was still sitting at his desk, quietly flipping through books. Because the drilling work on Mars was not going well, he simply skipped the hibernation technology and began to study the space elevator technology that was on par with it in the system. If you want to completely get out of a planet, the space elevator is undoubtedly a necessary technology. Whether it is transporting materials on a large scale or building a so-called spaceport, a stable space elevator is a prerequisite. The most important factor limiting the space elevator is the material strength problem. Ding-ling-ling. A piercing landline ring sounded, interrupting his thoughts. Hello. He reached out and grabbed the landline beside him and asked softly, "What's going on?" Hearing the voice coming from the landline microphone, Lu Yongchang's expression changed slightly. Really? Let them collect enough samples and return immediately. By the way, remember to mark that area. Chapter 130 National Announcement. 3 days later, the White House of the United States. Albert stood by the window and looked out through the gauze curtain. Seeing the crowd sitting in protest around the White House, Albert's face instantly darkened. Damn, why are these people still here? Albert growled in a low voice. Didn't an announcement be made last night? His Excellency the President. There was a slight sigh from the side. Our announcement is too late. Seeing Albert looking at him, William Blair shrugged and said helplessly, "They don't believe us at all." FXXK. Albert's face turned slightly red, and he cursed in a low voice. Did I do something wrong? The United States has no power left to save people. I'm doing this for the good of the United States. William Blair did not speak, just looked at Albert in front of him quietly. Bang. Just as Albert was about to continue his tirade, the door to the president's office was pushed open. Your Excellency, something happened. Director Moulton, I hope you can give me a reasonable explanation. Albert looked at Moulton in front of him with an ugly face, and his tone was full of suppressed anger. When has the door to the president's office been able to be opened directly by you? Moulton's face was full of panic. He swallowed slightly, not paying attention to the threat in Albert's words, and directly handed a document in his hand to the president's desk. Sir, none of this matters. Take a look at this first. Albert glanced deeply at Moulton and didn't reply. He just reached out and picked up the files on the table. According to the latest observations, the sun has entered a rapid aging stage and is expected to become a red giant within a few years. The moment he saw the title, Albert couldn't help but be stunned. Sun, rapid aging. I remember, doesn't the sun still have 4 to 5 billion years to live? As he spoke, Albert reached out and opened the document. Your Excellency, according to normal development, this is indeed the case, Moulton said with a bitter look on his face. But according to NASA's latest observation data, in just 1 year, the sun seems to have traveled hundreds of millions of years. According to our prediction. Moulton paused slightly, took a deep breath, and then said in a deep voice, within 10 years, he will completely become a red giant, and by then, both Mercury and Venus will be swallowed up. The movement of Albert's hand suddenly stopped. Professor, the United States has discovered that the sun is abnormal. In the quiet office, the computer screen in front of Yongchang suddenly lit up. A document appeared on it, and Ling's voice also came. Yongchang's eyes moved slightly, and he stopped writing. Then, with slightly trembling hands, he unscrewed the pen holder and inserted the pen tip into the ink bottle beside him. While pushing the lever to absorb the ink, Yongchang asked softly, how is the United States going to respond, Professor? The United States seems to want to hide this news. Yongchang's movement suddenly stopped. It's the same as before. Yongchang sneered, his eyes getting deeper and deeper. 0. Help me contact Congressman Lee. Yes. 12. Noon the next day. Magic City. Because it was a day off, Zhao Ziji sat in the living room after lunch, watching the TV program in front of him boredly. Hey, TV is becoming more and more boring recently. What kind of filming was done here? The martial arts are all in slow motion, and the special effects are not even as good as those in games. Zhao Ziji frowned and reached out to grab the remote control aside, preparing to change to a TV station. The next moment, the TV program was suddenly interrupted, and the TV turned into a black screen. Zhao Ziji looked at the TV in front of him in astonishment. What's going on? He didn't press the remote control either. He stood up and walked to the TV, raising his hand to try the oldest 45-degree slap method to repair it. Just when his right hand was about to touch the TV screen, the black screen TV came on again. However, the content played has changed. Congressman Lee. Zhao Ziji looked at the old man on the TV and sighed softly subconsciously. Good afternoon to all compatriots of Xia Kingdom. The old man cast his deep gaze directly at the camera. Next, I want to announce a few very important things. Please, all Xia country compatriots, be sure to tell each other. Zhao Ziji's heart skipped a beat. Something happened. This is definitely something big. He quickly took out his mobile phone from his pocket and opened the Penguin app. The moment the app is opened, a small window video that cannot be closed appears on the mobile phone page. It's amazingly the same as the picture on the TV. Zhao Ziji's expression changed slightly. Such an exaggerated propaganda method. Before Zhao Ziji could react, the old man's calm voice came from the phone and TV simultaneously. According to the observation data of Xia Guo Observatory, the sun has entered a rapid aging stage due to unknown reasons. It is expected that within 10 years, the sun will enter the red giant stage and swallow up the two planets Mercury and Venus. Within 15 years, the sun will erupt with a helium flash. The Earth will be completely destroyed by a helium flash. Zao. Ziggy stared at the TV in front of him. Are you kidding? Without giving any buffer time, Counselor Lee's voice sounded again. I declare that from this moment on, Xiago will enter the first level of combat readiness. All materials will be uniformly allocated by the state. The global evacuation operation will be launched immediately. Please contact the embassy in time to avoid emissions. From now on, Xiago will close all international trade channels. Zao. Ziggy's eyes widened suddenly, and he took a breath. First level combat readiness? Fuck, things are serious. This is the highest level of war readiness. After announcing a series of iron-blooded measures, the old man on TV gradually eased his expression. Everyone, we started preparing for this natural disaster a year ago. At present, we have completed a series of resource reserve plans. Next, Xiago will invest a lot of resources in the aerospace industry. By then, the quality of life of every citizen may decline. Here, I apologize to you all. The old man stood up, faced the screen, and bowed deeply. A few seconds later, the old man straightened up and said solemnly, finally, please believe in the country, and don't panic too much. I assure you that Xiago will never fall here. Xiago will never give up anyone. Chapter 131. Is Xiago crazy? The TV screen switches quietly. The national speech is over. Zao Ziggy stared at the TV in front of him distractedly. After a long time, he suddenly woke up, took out his cell phone, and opened his scarf. Sure enough. The entertainment industry news that was originally on the hot search list was wiped out. On such a huge list, there is only one hot search left. National address. Xia Kingdom has entered a state of first level combat readiness. Looking at the big black and red characters, Zao Ziggy swallowed slightly and reached out to open the hot search. The page starts loading. Perhaps because too many people are browsing, the web page is obviously lagging. But luckily the server didn't go down. The trending content is nothing interesting. It is nothing more than a retelling of what Congressman Lee said. Zao Ziggy quickly dragged the screen to the comment area below. He glanced at it casually, and a high praise reply quickly attracted his attention. Oolong tea seasoning. Fuck. I completely understand. Starting from controllable nuclear fusion, all Xia's actions are to pave the way for this natural disaster. The Moon Palace Plan, the Nanshanman Plan, and even the Heavenly Court Plan. The purpose of these plans is to take the people of Xia Kingdom to escape from the Earth. If you don't believe it, you can take a look at the deadline of the Heavenly Court project, which is in 15 years. In addition to these plans, you can think about it. In the past year, great changes have actually taken place around us. Many light industrial factories have gradually disappeared and been replaced by some heavy industrial factories. Zao Ziggy's expression was slightly suffocated, and he subconsciously thought about it in his mind. Indeed. After such a reminder, he immediately recalled the changes in or exports he had discovered before. On Lith there was a hint of worry in his eyes. If Xiago does this, will it attract prying eyes from other countries? Facts have proved that Zao Ziggy's concerns were correct. America, is Xiago crazy? Albert looked at the documents in front of him with horror. Your Excellency, President, let's not talk about whether Xiago is crazy or not. There are more people protesting outside the White House. At this point, William Blair paused slightly. In addition to those who have objections to the Mars rescue plan, there are many people asked about the authenticity of what Xiago said. Not only that, according to the CIA's investigation, there are already some unharmonious voices in the country. William Blair's eyes were full of worry. Your Excellency, I think that at this point, we no longer need to keep it secret. Albert took a deep breath. After thinking for a short time, he asked in a deep voice, how was the discussion with those professors? After such a long time, I don't want them to come up with a reliable plan. Facing Albert's question, William Blair hesitated for a while. Your Excellency, their conclusion is the same as NASA's. According to the current rate of change, the sun will enter the red giant stage sooner or later. But, just what? Albert frowned suddenly. It's just, we don't know how Xiago came to the conclusion that the sun will have a helium flash within 15 years. William Blair's eyes were full of doubts. According to the calculations of NASA and these professors, a helium flash will occur on the sun at least decades later. So, have they discussed a solution? Albert waved his hand impatiently. After such a long discussion, they won't only discuss this little thing, right, Your Excellency. They believe that building an underground shelter is a better option. Seeing Albert's impatient look, William Blair lowered his eyes slightly and whispered, "The underground city can effectively isolate the high temperature. As for the helium flash, we have decades to build an interstellar spacecraft to avoid it." Albert nodded thoughtfully. "In this case, we can't make this public." Albert's eyes flashed with a fierce light. "The technology in the United States is not that high. Dungeons and starships are destined to only accommodate a portion of Americans. Let's start population screening from now on. Remember, only the most elite are needed." William Blair nodded solemnly. Although he knows that this decision is cruel to most Americans, he also knows that at this time, sacrificing some people is the most correct choice. The new S White House press secretary, "NASA has not observed any abnormal data. The authenticity of the information ZRGUO said is questionable. Please treat it rationally, like the United States." Gillian Gall also made the same choice. Geely News Spokesperson, "We have not observed any abnormal data." Gallic Spokesperson, +1, the three major rogue countries spoke out at the same time, which suddenly calmed down the originally turbulent world. Except for Sioux State. The emperor sat in his office with a heavy face, quietly looking at the documents just sent by ZRGUO. "How's the verification going?" The emperor reached out and pressed the communication button on his desk and asked in a deep voice, "Are these data from ZRGUO reliable?" Soon, a series of urgent responses sounded from the speakers placed nearby. "Sir, after comparison, we can confirm that this data is completely correct. It's just that we need to spend more time to verify the mathematical model. Our mathematicians don't understand some of the transformation steps." Hearing this, the emperor nodded gently and rubbed his eyebrows vigorously. "Please contact Counselor Lee for me. I need to discuss countermeasures with him." 10 minutes after several major Western countries issued statements, the National Astronomical Observatory of Zaire quietly changed its homepage. All the fancy links and pictures were removed from the homepage, leaving only two documents. One document is all the observation data of the sun in the past year. The other document is naturally the mathematical model of the sun after the mutation derived by LV Yongchang. As the first country to announce the solar crisis, Zaire has attracted the attention of 232 countries and regions around the world at this moment. The documents uploaded by the National Astronomical Observatory of Zaire were naturally downloaded countless copies at the first time. Every country has started the verification work. Even many private bigwigs have begun to mobilize their small astronomical telescopes to verify the data. Time passes bit by bit. After more than 10 hours of fermentation, the whole thing broke out. First, the Sioux country took the lead in expressing its position. After multiple verifications by our side, the data provided by the Zaire country is completely true, and the judgment on the sun is completely correct. Here, I call on every country to put aside their prejudices and sit down to discuss countermeasures together. Chapter 132, Return of Zhuan II. Holy shit. A loud shout came from the president's office in the White House of the United States. The two bodyguards at the door shuddered slightly, looked at each other, and shrugged lightly. Over the past year, the angry curses in the president's office have become more and more frequent. The two bodyguards stood up straight, thinking secretly in their hearts in the office. Bang, bang, bang. Albert slapped the desk in front of him with a sullen face. "Crazy. All of them are crazy. Xiago is fine, but Sugo, what does Sugo want to do? And those small countries, Pakistan, Serbia, what do they want to do? Don't their leaders know that it will be difficult if things get out of hand?" Sugo's first statement set a good example. Although countless small countries did not have the strength to verify the accuracy of the mathematical model, they still turned to Xiaguo Point after all. Every country on the earth now knows that the United States can even abandon its own astronauts. The defection of these countries is not a big problem. After all, most of them are insignificant small countries. The big problem is that as international public opinion continues to ferment, several Western powers have also been set in motion. Point as the countries of Chile and Gaul could not withstand the pressure and chose to surrender. The huge pressure was all on Albert alone. Mr. President, give up the original plan. Defense Minister Anthony sighed deeply, his eyes full of disappointment, and gently threw down a sentence. The United States is no longer the United States of the past. The loose muscles on Albert's face trembled violently for a few times, and then he stretched out his wrinkled hand and rubbed his eyes. After a moment of silence, he whispered, "I'm tired hearing this." The vice president, who had been acting as an invisible man on the side, changed his expression. Cough. Cough cough. The vice president coughed violently a few times. "Mr. President, the United States cannot do without your leadership, Albert." He sighed deeply. He also knew that in the face of the current situation, it was impossible to leave the burden behind. No one would want to take over this mess. Tell Xiaguo that we are willing to sit down and negotiate. Hold a UN interim meeting in half a month. A few days ago. Mars orbit. Zhuan second dragged a long blue tail flame at its tail, quickly broke free from the gravity of Mars, and flew straight to the blue planet in the solar system. It's finally over. Hang Fan stretched, rubbed his sore shoulders, and sighed loudly. To be honest, I don't want to come to Mars again in this life. Now, when I mention Mars, all I have in my mind are those drilling holes. Bay Yixen chuckled and said nothing. On the other side, Joey pierced Han Fan's lie in annoyance. Forget it. When we get back to the ground, you'll start clamoring to go to space again. Han Fan laughed awkwardly and smacked his lips. To be honest, I'm a little craving for hot pot. When we get back to the ground, I'll have to have a good meal. I'm almost vomiting after eating space food for so long. Hearing this, Baixuan and Zhawanai smiled with empathy. Suddenly, Baixuan seemed to have thought of something and turned his head to look at Andrew in the passenger seat. By the way, Andrew, I have good news for you. In the cabin, Baixuan smiled slightly and said softly, "Xiaguo agreed to your request. However, considering that you still have American citizenship, we can only allow you to live in Xiaguo for a long time, which is basically equivalent to a Xiaguo green card." A hint of joy flashed in the eyes of Andrew and the other two, but soon, deep sorrow surged into their hearts again. "Captain Bay, thank you." Andrew was silent for a while, and said anxiously, "But can't we have Xi nationality, and my family? They are still in the United States." They, calm down, my friend. Baixuan's smile became more and more intense. Listen carefully to what I say. For now, due to confidentiality factors, there are some things I can't tell you yet. Believe me, it won't be long before you can reunite with your family. Andrew's face showed some confusion. He didn't understand a little point, but when he heard the words confidentiality agreement, he quickly shut up. He knew his position very well. Now they are basically equivalent to stateless people. Once they're noisy, they will have no place to stay. There are still 5 days before the UN General Assembly. Calling the Ground Command Center. Zhuan II has arrived in geosynchronous orbit. Please give instructions. Bay Yixen's full voice came from the loudspeaker of the Ground Command Center. Fang Zhu, who had been waiting at the command center early, smiled with relief the moment he heard the voice. Ground Command Center received. Welcome home. A few hours later, the bottom of the dusty Zhuan II spurted out several long blue flames and slowly landed on the ground. Zhuan II, please note, do not open the hatch. After learning that Zhuan II had returned, Yongchang put down half of his work of checking calculations and took over the command in protective clothing. We need to conduct all-round disinfection of Zhuan II. Bay Yongchang and others naturally understood Liu Yongchang's approach point. After all, they are carrying alien life from Mars. Although it has been sterilized by cosmic rays in the atmosphere, it is basically impossible for unknown life forms to remain in the cabin shell point. But in the face of potential dangers, no matter how careful you are, you should be careful point. But the moment they saw the disinfection equipment, Yongchang and others realized their youth point. I saw a few fire trucks parked next to Zuan number 2 point. The next moment, high concentration disinfectant was sprayed directly from the faucet of the fire truck, completely drenching the entire Zuan number 2 point. After 3 consecutive sprays of high concentration disinfectant, they were greeted by several large flamethrowers, although he knew that these flames would not cause any damage to Zuan 2. Yongchang, who was sitting in the cockpit and watching the tongues of flames coming toward him, still had a few drops of cold sweat fall on his forehead. Professor Liu shouldn't be so exaggerated. Hearing the voice coming from the radio, Liu Yongchang looked solemn. Because we don't know if disinfectant is effective against alien creatures, we can only use the simplest and most brutal method to disinfect them. Yongchang reached out and wiped the cold sweat on his forehead. Then Liu Yongchang was stunned and then said, after the whole body is disinfected, we will be quarantined and observed for 14 days. PS. The problem with the rating of this book. Tomato has changed the rating system. I don't know why it dropped from 9.3 to 8.3. However, after recently measuring up, there are indeed many readers who read less than 30 minutes and directly give it a bad rating. Comment. Chapter 133 Slice Observation. After the external disinfection work was completed, Yongchang and others breathed a sigh of relief. Zuan number 2, please note that you should not leave the cabin after opening the hatch. Someone will collect the samples. LV. Yongchang's command came from the radio point. So, a few minutes later, Yongchang and others sat in the driver's seat blankly, watching several staff members wearing tight protective clothing walk into the cabin and carry all the samples out. Captain Han Fan's voice was full of resentment. The script should not be like this, right? Shouldn't we be attending the celebration banquet at this time? Ahem. Yongchang's eyes twitched again. Don't rush. Maybe when we get to the quarantine point, we can have a big meal. As soon as the voice fell, several staff members wearing protective clothing and carrying medical boxes walked into the cabin point, looking at Dabe walking straight towards them. The faces of the 6 astronauts became stiff. Captain Yongchang, please cooperate. We need to conduct a comprehensive examination of you. The leading staff member opened the medical box and took out a bunch of bottles and jars. Please provide urine and feces samples, and blood tests will be required later. At the end, the staff member added, these are all arranged by Professor Liu. Han Fan looked at the various instruments in front of him with a pale face and swallowed slightly. Excuse me, can we eat hot pot after these examinations are completed? Several staff members paused slightly and then raised their heads to look at Han Fan together. Even through the protective mask, Han Fan could feel the smiles in the eyes of several staff members. What are you thinking about? The leading staff member said unhappily. There is a special diet at the quarantine point. In order to prevent accidents, you can only eat specific foods during these 14 days. What's more, such inspections must be carried out every day within 14 days, which is also to eliminate the interference of diet on the test results. Yongchang and 6 others. Zyagos. First laboratory. The biological sub-laboratory point is a laboratory that has just been built. The equipment inside is naturally the latest and most advanced point. After all, the role of biological laboratories is not only about hibernation technology point, the improvement of human genes, the extension of lifespan, and the treatment of alien viruses or bacteria are all inseparable from biotechnology point. It may not be felt on Earth point, but once humans really enter the universe and become an interstellar civilization, the average lifespan of humans of more than 70 years is completely not enough. LV Yongchang, wearing protective clothing, slowly walked into the laboratory. Professor Liu, a slightly excited male voice came from a distance. This way, LV. Yongchang's eyes moved slightly, and he quickly looked in the direction of the voice point, looking at the figure waving at him from a distance. He smiled point even through the thick and tight protective clothing. He recognized the man at the first time point. Mao Zengzi, an academician of the Academy of Sciences, a big shot in the biological science community of Xiaguo point. At only 36 years old, he is considered one of the youngest academicians of the Academy of Sciences. Like Fang Zhu, the generation gap between Mao Zengzi and this 21-year-old young man is not that deep, and their relationship is much more harmonious on weekdays. LV Yongchang quickened his pace, walked quickly to Mao Zengzi, nodded and smiled. "Brother Mao, how is it? Have you taken out the sample?" The large protective suit opposite nodded repeatedly, with a bit of excitement in his tone. "Of course. I've been waiting for you for a long time." With that, Mao Zengzi turned and walked towards an isolated laboratory point. After a meticulous disinfection process, the two entered a brightly lit laboratory point. At the first moment, LV Yongchang was attracted by the sample on the laboratory table point. He quickened his pace and quickly walked to the laboratory table point. Through the protective mask, he carefully looked at the creature in front of him point. The whole body was dark brown, and the surface was dry and wrinkled, just like a dry branch point. However, the degree of distortion of this branch was obviously much higher. The whole branch was twisted into a ball of thread point. LV Yongchang frowned slightly, but a guess arose in his heart point. This should be its self-protection measure, right? LV Yongchang subconsciously picked up the tweezers beside him, clamped both ends of it, and gently pulled it point. There was a clear sense of resistance point. In order to avoid damaging the sample, he gave up the urge to untie this ball of thread himself. "Before you came, we measured the length." After entering the laboratory, Mao Zengzi's tone became more serious. "We measured dozens of samples in total, and the average length was about 20 centimeters. LV Yongchang was stunned and subconsciously muttered to himself, "So long." "Although it is not confirmed yet, we estimate that this fungus should be similar to mushrooms on Earth." Mao Zengzi's voice continued to come point. LV Yongchang nodded thoughtfully. "Have you done any slice observation?" Mao Zengzi shook his head quickly. "Not yet." LV Yongchang nodded gently point. "Yes, the samples were delivered only a few dozen minutes ago. How could the research speed be so fast point? It's good enough to be able to measure the basic data. Then let's do slice observation first." As he spoke, Lu Yongchang reached for the equipment from the side, carefully tore off a bit of fungal tissue with tweezers, and placed it on a glass slide point. The surface of the fungus was very hard, and he felt extremely obvious resistance during the tearing process. But as the saying goes, great efforts can produce miracles. After tearing hard, the fungus sample was still torn open. The flock-like tissue inside is exposed point. Then, lay it flat, cover it with a cover slip, and stain it. A series of operations flow smoothly point. In order to accurately observe fungal samples, Lu Yongchang and Mao Zengzi made several temporary mounts of different parts of the fungi point. When the image of the optical microscope was projected onto the computer screen, both of them were stunned. "This structure." Mao Zengzi took a breath and said, "It's similar to the fungal cell structure on Earth." Lu Yongchang nodded solemnly. "It's roughly the same, but there are still some differences. At least its cell walls are much thicker than species on Earth. And, haven't you noticed that the cells of this fungus only occupy 1/10 of the entire cell wall?" As he spoke, Lu Yongchang adjusted the magnification of the optical microscope so that it could display more cells. Mao Zengzi looked startled point. Sure enough, some cells even shrank to 1/20th of the cell wall space. He subconsciously wanted to move the slide to see more cells, etc. There was a bit of surprise in Lu Yongchang's voice. "They are absorbing water." Chapter 134 Fungi that have survived for tens of thousands of years. Hearing LV Yongchang's shout, Mao Zengzi's expression changed slightly, and he immediately stopped what he was doing and looked at the computer screen again. "Look." LV Yongchang stretched out his hand and tapped on a few slightly larger cells. "Look carefully, their size is slowly increasing." Mao Zengzi quickly focused his attention on these cells. Time passed bit by bit point. The cell size gradually expanded point. The most significant cell even doubled in size, reaching 1/5 of the cell wall space. "This fungus is still alive." Mao Zengzi swallowed slightly. "Unbelievable. That's Mars. In such a harsh environment, these fungi can still remain active. Yongchang's eyes moved slightly, and he turned his head to look at the researcher next to him. Please help me test the age of these fungal samples, Mao. Zhengzi was stunned when he heard this, but he quickly reacted. He raised his eyebrows and whispered, do you suspect that these fungi have lived for a long time? Yongchang nodded gently. Yes, I suspect these cells are starved to their current state. Starved? To this extent? Mao Zhengzi looked thoughtfully at the cells that were constantly expanding in the microscope. It is possible, but the smallest cells seem to have lost their activity. Yongchang shrugged. Maybe they were starved to death. Anyway, let's wait for the test results over there to come out. While waiting, Yongchang silently looked at the fungal cells on the display screen. At this time, some cells have expanded to half the size of the cell wall space, while those cells that are too small have not changed at all. It seems to have reached the limit. Yongchang's eyes moved slightly. The recovery speed of these cells is getting slower and slower. Next, switch to an electron microscope to look at these cells. When Yongchang and Mao Zhengzi re-extracted the samples and pre-processed them, the door of the isolation laboratory opened again. Professor Lu, the test results are out. The voice of the researcher just now reached Lu Yongchang's ears. After completing the action in his hands, Lu Yongchang reached out and took the document in the researcher's hand. When he saw the content of the document, even he couldn't help but exclaimed, what? 10,000 years ago? Lu Yongchang's exclamation also attracted the attention of Mao Zhengzi on the side. 10,000 years. Mao Zhengzi looked over with a strange look on his face and looked at the report, then frowned and asked the researcher, how many times have you tested it? Are you sure there is no mistake? Faced with the doubts of the two big guys, the researcher's face showed some uneasiness. He nodded gently and affirmed in a low voice, a total of 3 tests were conducted. The shortest time of the 3 groups of samples was 10,000 years ago, and the longest was about 20,000 years ago. Lu Yongchang took a deep breath, his eyes full of shock. Fungi that have survived underground on Mars for 10,000 years. You know, fungi on Earth only have a lifespan of a few months in a suitable environment. If they live in a harsh living environment, they are considered tenacious. If they can survive for a few minutes, brother Mao, hurry up. I think the organelles of these fungi will definitely give us a surprise. After a busy time, the observation screen of the electron microscope was also displayed on the computer screen. Looking at the strange organelles in the fungal cells, Yongchang couldn't help but stand there. Hiss. Mao Zhengzi smacked his lips and said with a tangled face, until now, I really feel that this is an alien life. Yongchang frowned and nodded. The shape is a bit strange, but you can still see something. Look, this part in the middle should be similar to the nucleus. Mao Zhengzi nodded and agreed with this view. Just when Mao Zhengzi was about to express his opinion, Yongchang suddenly interrupted Mao Zhengzi's thoughts with a light exclamation. Something's wrong. Yongchang's expression suddenly became serious as he spoke. He reached out and adjusted the electron microscope. Then, he reached out and gently tapped the computer screen. This is a cell that can absorb water and swell, and that is a dead cell that has no reaction to water. Take a closer look. What's the difference between the two? Hearing what Yongchang said, Mao Zhengzi hurried to check carefully. After a careful comparison, Mao Zhengzi's eyes flashed with surprise. Why are there so many fewer organelles in this cell? Yongchang shook his head slowly. No, it's not less. It should be incomplete to be more accurate. You can see it by comparing the organelles inside the two cells. Does this organelle look like it's missing half? And these organelles are basically missing a small half of the structure. It's like, at this point, Yongchang frowned slightly and seemed to have trouble finding an adjective. It's like being bitten. Mao Zhengzi's voice was full of excitement. That's right. It's like being eaten apart. Yongchang raised his eyebrows when he heard Mao Zhengzi's description. Yes, that's exactly what I mean. If I'm not mistaken, this fungus can survive on Mars because of this ability. Hearing LV Yongchang's words, Mao Zengzi trembled slightly, and his eyes showed a bit of weirdness. To be honest, if this scene happened to a person today, he didn't eat, so he digested a part of his intestines. Tomorrow, he didn't eat again, so he digested a part of his liver. Mao Zengzi couldn't help but feel a chill coming from behind him. LV Yongchang was excited and remembered the system's prompts some time ago. No, this should be only part of the reason. The look in his eyes became more and more excited. If you want to survive in an environment like Mars for tens of thousands of years, you can't just rely on this trick, hibernation. It must be a very deep hibernation ability. Looking at LV Yongchang standing there muttering to himself like a madman, Mao Zengzi couldn't help but swallow his saliva gently. For some reason, he suddenly felt as if he couldn't get a word in. Suddenly, LV Yongchang, who had been mumbling to himself with his head down, suddenly raised his head, with a strange light flashing in his eyes, staring at Mao Zengzi. Yongchang? Mao Zengzi swallowed his saliva again and asked cautiously, what's wrong, brother? Mao, have someone send some mice over, I want to do some tests. While speaking, LV Yongchang patted Mao Zengzi's shoulder excitedly. If nothing unexpected happens, there must be a substance in these fungi that can allow organisms to enter deep hibernation. Chapter 135 Special Protein. More than an hour later, LV Yongchang quietly looked at the mice running around in the cage in front of him. What are you going to do, Mao Zengzi asked softly. LV Yongchang pondered for a moment. A hint of cruelty flashed in his eyes, and he pointed to the untreated fungal sample next to him. Grind the fungus into powder and inject it directly into these mice. Mao Zengzi's expression changed drastically. Are you crazy? These are alien life forms, and mice have no resistance to them. LV Yongchang sighed deeply. There is not enough time. We can't analyze these Martian creatures slowly. Now, we need the fastest and most direct solution. First, I need to know whether there are any substances I want inside these fungi. After grinding a whole fungus sample into powder, LV Yongchang and Mao Zengzi mixed it with saline, and finally made 15 fungal mixtures of different concentrations. In order to ensure the rigor of the experiment, LV Yongchang carefully selected 20 mice, 5 of which were used as the control group and only injected with the same amount of physiological saline. The remaining 15 mice, as the experimental group, will be injected with different concentrations and equal amounts of fungal mixtures. After all the work was completed, LV Yongchang put the mice into a special breeding cage with a solemn look. Next, all they have to do is wait with peace of mind. At the beginning, both the 15 mice in the experimental group and the 5 mice in the control group were in very good mental state. But, in just over 10 minutes, abnormal phenomena appeared. The 15 mice in the experimental group closed their eyes and fell into the breeding cage. Among them, the mice with higher injection concentrations took less time from waking up to coma. The mouse injected with the highest concentration of fungal mixture fell to the ground in just 10 seconds, while the mouse injected with the lowest concentration of fungal mixture supported it for several minutes. Seeing this scene, LV Yongchang's pupils suddenly dilated a few points. What a domineering effect. You know, even the highest concentration only contains 1% fungal powder, brother. Mao LV Yongchang said in a low voice. Get ready to start the inspection. Mao Zengzi looked serious and immediately opened the breeding cage and took out the 15 labeled mice one by one. After a detailed inspection, LV Yongchang took a breath of cold air. At first, he thought that these 15 mice were simply in a state of sleep. But according to the results of the inspection, this is definitely not a simple sleep. Strictly speaking, this is basically equivalent to a state of suspended animation. When the body temperature of a mouse is 38, the normal breathing rate is 160 times/minute, and the normal heart rate is 625 times/minute. But now, the breathing rate of the mouse injected with the highest concentration of the mixture has dropped to an extremely exaggerated level, and it will take nearly 10 minutes to breathe. As for the heartbeat, it has also dropped to 2 to 3 times per minute. The body temperature has even dropped directly to the ambient temperature point. If the instrument had not detected that it still had a heartbeat and breathing, Yongchang would have even thought that the mouse was dead. Although the mouse injected with the lowest concentration of the mixture also entered a state of suspended animation, the data was much more normal, and the breathing and heartbeat rates basically dropped to 10% of the normal level. Mao Zengzi, who was responsible for recording the data, had a violent tremor in his pupils. This is amazing. If this state can be maintained, these mice can even sleep for hundreds of years. Although the mice were successfully put into a real hibernation state, there was not much joy in Yongchang's eyes. The most important issue now is, how should we wake them up? Hearing this, Mao Zengzi's expression froze suddenly. Yes, how to wake them up. There is still one day before the United Nations General Assembly. In the biological sub-laboratory. Yongchang was wearing a protective suit and sat on a chair with a melancholy look on his face. Mao Zengzi held a thick document in his hand and walked quickly to Yongchang. How is it? What's the result? Yongchang asked in a low voice. A gleam of light flashed in his eyes. Mao Zengzi sighed softly and shook his head slowly. It didn't work. We have used all the methods we can use, but none of them worked. And speaking of this, Mao Zengzi paused slightly. There is another bad news. We found that the mouse injected with the lowest concentration of the mixture has begun to consume the fat in its body. Although the speed is not fast at the current consumption rate, if we don't take any measures, it will die in about a month. Yongchang was silent for a moment, and a trace of guilt flashed in his eyes. Inject the nutrient solution first. By the way, what are the results of the blood test? Mao Zengzi looked a little excited. Some abnormal objects were detected in the blood. It's not an object. Mao Zengzi subconsciously reached out and scratched his head, but scratched on the protective suit. He retracted his hand awkwardly and said tangled, how should I put it? According to observation, it is more like a biological enzyme. It's just that its structure is completely different from the biological enzymes on Earth. The only thing that's certain is that it's an extremely special protein. A flash of light flashed in Yongchang's eyes. Biological enzymes. Thinking of the system prompts, Yongchang was already 90% sure the problem lies in this so-called special protein. Can't we just prescribe a drug to solve this biological enzyme? He asked after pondering for a moment. It's difficult. Mao Zengzi shook his head vigorously. Yongchang, you should know that although there are 500 to 600 kinds of amino acids on the Earth, life on the Earth is composed of 20 specific kinds of amino acids. Although there is currently no definite answer in the scientific community, many people believe that this should be related to the early evolution of the Earth. Even though Mars and the Earth are very similar, their evolution must be very different. That also led to a result. The amino acids that make up these proteins are not the amino acids that we are familiar with. Yongchang's expression changed slightly. This means that the biological knowledge currently possessed by humans is basically of no use. Mao Zengzi continued. At present, we only have one way to slowly decipher the genetic information of Martian fungi. However, this may take a significant amount of time. No. Yongchang shook his head and rejected the proposal. Cracking genetic information? What a joke. Who knows how long it takes to make this thing from scratch? Maybe there is another way. The guilt in Yongchang's eyes became even stronger as he murmured to himself. P.S. Ahem. Thank you all for your 5-star reviews. If conditions permit, in a few days, I will update it. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 136. The United Nations Conference begins. Yongchang was silent for a moment and said softly, Brother Mao, I need a lot of mice. Mao Zengzi couldn't help but freeze in his tracks when he heard what LV Yongchang said. A few seconds later, he realized the meaning behind LV Yongchang's words. His expression changed drastically. He stepped forward, got close to LV Yongchang, and said in a low voice, "You are not going to let the mice produce antibodies to this protein." LV Yongchang didn't speak, but through the protective mask, Mao Zengzi got the answer from his face. Damn. Mao Zengzi's eyes flashed with fear. Do you know how big the consequences will be? That's an alien creature. We don't know what kind of reaction it will trigger with Earth creatures. Once the sample is leaked, do you know what will happen? LV Yongchang's face showed a bit of bitterness. He nodded gently. Of course, I know what the consequences will be, but this is the only method that can be effective quickly. Brother Mao, do you know how long it took to sequence the human genome? From the first discussion of this plan to its final completion, it took nearly 40 years. In 1984, the United States first proposed a sequencing plan, and in 1990, the plan officially began. In April 2003, the genome sequencing plan was announced to be completed, but the completion here only completed the sequencing task of the genome euchromatin region, which accounts for about 92% of the entire genome, and there is another 8%, which is the so-called heterochromatin region, which has been stuck for 19 years. Mao Zengzi fell silent. After a long time, he said hoarsely, "But our current biotechnology has." LV Yongchang interrupted him directly. "Not enough. This is an alien creature. You and I don't know how difficult it is to analyze its genes. I can't bet on this possibility. If the research progress is stuck for another 19 years, humanity will be finished. Besides, I believe in the power of life. Even in the face of unknown antigens, the immune system can still make some reactions. This can be seen from the mice injected with a lower concentration of the mixture. They did not fall asleep quickly." Mao Zengzi's eyes showed a trace of hesitation. After thinking for a long time, he sighed suddenly and said in a mosquito-like voice, "Just do as you say." After saying this, Mao Zengzi seemed to have been drained of all his strength, and his eyes were distracted as he looked at the 15 mice in the cage that were fake dead. "I really don't know where we will take humanity by doing this," he muttered to himself. That night, with the help of Zero, several remote large factories were transformed. All the production lines in the factory were evacuated, leaving only a few robotic arms. The entire factory is filled with densely packed cages, and the cages are full of lively little white mice. "How many little white mice do we have now?" LV Yongchang, wearing protective clothing, asked in a deep voice as he scanned the cages in front of him. "About 500,000. Mao Zengzi's voice came from the side. "There are probably nearly 10 million mice on the way, and they will be delivered in the next few days." LV Yongchang frowned slightly. "Not enough. 10 million is too few. At least 100 million are needed." Mao Zengzi was silent for a moment, nodded and said, "I will apply for allocation." The next moment, Lu Yongchang turned his head to the camera beside him and said, "Zero. Continue to transform the factory. I need enough space to accommodate 100 million mice." Zero's voice sounded quickly. "Yes, Professor. Also, list this area as a high-risk area. Once mice escape, kill them immediately." A trace of cruelty flashed in Lu Yongchang's eyes. "If there are abnormal personnel, notify the army immediately and kill them without mercy." Hundreds of millions of mice carrying alien life. Once a leak occurs, the consequences are unimaginable. Although there is only an unknown protease in the mice, who knows if there will be abnormal changes. If the original viruses and bacteria on the Earth mutate, humans may not even survive until the moment of the helium flash. The next day, the UN interim meeting was announced. Member Lee slowly walked into the huge conference venue. After finding Ziyuo's seat, he sat on the chair silently. The old man looked at the UN logo in front of him expressionlessly and slowly closed his eyes after a long wait. The voice of the UN Secretary General sounded. "Now, I declare that this UN interim meeting officially begins." The moment he heard this, the old man suddenly opened his eyes, and a gleam of light flashed in his slightly turbid eyes. The Secretary General's voice sounded again. "This UN interim meeting is to deal with the upcoming solar anomaly in the face of natural disasters, I hope all countries can put aside prejudices and disputes, unite, and work together to find a way out for 8 billion humans. First, please let Mr. Albert, the President of the United States, speak. Seeing Albert, who spoke slowly with a head of blonde hair, a trace of disdain flashed in the old man's eyes that others could hardly detect, and he closed his eyes again. Everyone, the sun is about to change, and human civilization only has the last 15 years left. The United States has always been committed to finding a way out for mankind. Such a huge crisis will never be resisted by a country or a region alone. Therefore, here, I appeal to all leaders to form an Earth-Human alliance to jointly resist this natural disaster. Albert said excitedly. Point after Albert finished speaking, the Secretary General of the United Nations spoke again. Then, let's vote on this draft. The old man slowly opened his eyes and reached out to gently press the voting button on the side. More than 10 minutes later, ZARGUO, XGUO, USGUO, GLIGUO, GALGUO, looking at the voting results in front of him, Albert's mouth twitched twice. As a permanent member of the Security Council, ZARGUO's opposition directly drove this draft into the ground. Congressman Lee. Albert was a little impatient and shouted with the microphone. To deal with this crisis, the only way for mankind is to unite. Why, Congressman? Lee raised his eyelids slightly and said softly, the draft is too rough. What should be done with the existing national political system? Who will lead it? How should resources be allocated? Albert's face froze, as if he was poked in a sore spot. These, can be discussed later. P.S. Add one more chapter. Chapter 137. Professor, a little white mouse has woken up. Ahem. Everyone, I have a plan here. How about you listen to it? After the Secretary General nodded, a gleam flashed in Counselor Lee's eyes. He adjusted the microphone in front of him and said softly, before proposing, I want you to watch a video. After that, the old man turned his head and winked at Han Kaiming, who was standing behind him. Han Kaiming understood and quickly took out a USB flash drive from the file bag beside him. The Secretary General looked at the old man with a puzzled face and reached out to take the USB flash drive handed over by Han Kaiming. Not only the Secretary General was puzzled, but everyone present, except ZARGUO and SYNOPSIS, was confused. Seeing the USB flash drive inserted into the computer and the projector started working, Counselor Lee's expression became more serious. The video started playing. A plane with forward swept wings and grey and white color appeared in front of everyone. A line of subtitles appeared at the bottom of the video. Zuan Nu X. The camera zoomed out, and 20 Zuan Nu X took off vertically from the ground in unison. The next moment, the noses of 20 planes rose up at the same time, drawing a beautiful arc, and leaping into the air. Almost everyone's eyes shifted to the old man. Facing the eyes of the crowd, the old man took a deep breath, and slowly put down the teacup in his hand. The latest news from this station. At present, the latest results of the United Nations meeting have been released. In order to deal with this solar crisis, the world has united for the first time and established the Earth-Human United Community of Shared Destiny, referred to as the Human Union. A few days later, the voice of the news anchor spread throughout Zaire country. After a short silence, Zaire country was boiling. What the hell? What the hell? What happened a few days ago? What's the situation? This is the Community of Shared Destiny. The Earth-Human United Community of Shared Destiny? Why does it feel like something incredible happened at the United Nations General Assembly? Blind guess. The table was overturned. Yes, at the scene, I was that table, and like the laughter and joy in Zaire country, other countries were obviously not very happy. But things have developed to this point, and it has reached a point where it cannot be reversed. A few days later, ZYAGO number 1 laboratory. LV Yongchang put his hand on his forehead and sat on a chair with a frown. 0. How is the condition of the mice? As soon as he finished speaking, the computer screen in front of him lit up. Professor, a total of 100 million mice have been tested, but the situation is not ideal. So far, more than 5 million mice have died. LV Yongchang's face sank in the past few days, after he and Mao Zengzi stayed up all night to study. They successfully extracted a relatively pure special biological enzyme from the inside of the Martian fungus at the same time. The biological sublaboratory has also carried out a simulation experiment of this special biological enzyme. They specially adjusted the concentration of the injection to an extremely low level. On the one hand, it was to buy a buffer time for the immune system of the mice. On the other hand, the samples brought back by Zhuan seemed a lot at the time, but facing 100 million mice, these samples were not enough. Such an operation was also taken to save raw materials. After all, it takes a lot of time to pick up on Mars. Ideals are beautiful, but reality is cruel. This operation, while solving two major problems, also caused a very serious problem. Because the concentration was too low, these mice did not enter the original pseudo-death state, but entered a state similar to the hibernation of Earth creatures, and it was an irreversible hibernation. The metabolism rate of mice is extremely high. Even if the energy consumption rate in the body has dropped a lot, it still can't last for a few days. Originally, in LV Yongchang's plan, nutrient solution could be used to maintain the lives of these mice. But, after the number increased, even zero could not take care of the status of all the mice. In this situation, but there is no relief. It will only get worse with the passage of time. According to Zero's estimate, 90% of the current 100 million mice will die within 3 days, and by the 5th day, basically all of them will die. LV Yongchang sighed deeply. At 3:58 am the next day. LV Yongchang fell asleep on his desk with a coat on his body. Even in his sleep, he still frowned. The reason was simple. In just one day, the number of dead mice soared from 5 million to 20 million. It can be said that in just a few days, the lives of 20 million mice were on his hands. Professor, in the quiet office, a slightly mechanical electronic synthesized voice suddenly sounded. Professor, a mouse has woken up. The next second, LV Yongchang opened his eyes suddenly. He stretched out his hand, rubbed his somewhat stiff face vigorously, and asked in a deep voice, "Zero, are you sure you are awake?" "Of course." As the electronic synthesized voice fell, the computer screen in front of LV Yongchang quietly lit up. "Look, this is a picture of the FN102 breeding cage in Factory B." On the computer screen, a little white mouse buried its head in the feed bowl in front of it, and ate and drank. Obviously, it was starved by the hibernation in the past few days. Looking at this scene, LV Yongchang stood up suddenly, his eyes flashing with excitement. "Zero, wake up Mao Zengzi, and ask him to go to this area immediately." While speaking, LV Yongchang put on his coat, opened the office door and walked out. Chapter 138 The Miracle of Life. FN1 area of Plant B. Wearing protective clothing, LV Yongchang ran breathlessly to the area mentioned by Ling. Just as he was about to look for the so-called 8-tick cage, a burst of hurried footsteps came from behind him. "Yongchang." Mao Zengzi's voice came. Because of the protective clothing as a barrier, his voice seemed particularly dull. "I heard from Ling that a little white mouse woke up." LV Yongchang nodded gently, but did not look back, just looking for it in a pile of cages. "Quick," Ling said. "It was a tick cage. Help me find it." Mao Zengzi nodded gently and hurriedly bent down to look for it. A few minutes later, Mao Zengzi took a small lion cage from the shelf in front of him. In the cage, a little white mouse was jumping and scratching the cage. Unbelievable. Looking at this energetic little white mouse, LV Yongchang took a deep breath, his eyes full of amazement. From this little white mouse, he once again felt the miracle of life. LV Yongchang took the breeding cage from Mao Zengzi with trembling hands, raised it in front of him, and looked at it deeply. The little white mouse also stopped scratching the cage, and looked at LV Yongchang. "God bless Xiago." "No, God bless Renlian." LV Yongchang realized his slip of the tongue and quickly corrected with a smile. "When the experiment is over, I will keep it in the office. From now on, it will be called Aurora." Aurora. Mao Zengzi's eyes moved slightly. "Latin goddess of dawn." LV Yongchang nodded vigorously, and the smile in his eyes became more and more intense. "Not bad. It makes me see the dawn of human beings to achieve long distance interstellar travel. As he spoke. LV Yongchang raised his head and looked at the deep night sky again. It is estimated that it will not be long before he can enter space again. The scene of the last time he took Zuan number 1 to the sky was still vivid in his mind. The magnificent painting was flashing in his dreams all the time. So, Yongchang, what should we do now? Mao Zengzi raised his eyebrows and interrupted LV Yongchang's sigh. LV Yongchang, whose thoughts were interrupted, curled his lips slightly and looked at the breeding cage in his hand again. What else can we do? Prepare for a blood test. Today, I must find out the reason why it woke up. Mao Zengzi, ahem. Yongchang, you have to take it easy. I told you in advance that we have transferred all the mice here. If there is no miracle in a short period of time, this is our only experimental subject. LV Yongchang. A few hours later, the little white mouse Aurora shrank in the corner of the breeding cage, trembling with fear, and her small black eyes were filled with fear. Squeak. Do you know how I spent these few hours? How is it? Are the results out? LV Yongchang's voice came from a distance. After hearing this voice, Aurora shrank her thin body again. Some of the results are out. Mao Zengzi's voice was full of excitement. It's almost the same as we guessed. Aurora has an unknown antibody in her body. It is this antibody that has solved all those proteases. LV Yongchang snapped his fingers lightly, his eyes flashing with excitement. But have the antibodies been separated? Seeing Mao Zengzi nod, Lu Yongchang's eyes were more excited. Quick, go and try the effect of these antibodies. As he said, Lu Yongchang nodded at the 15 experimental group mice lying on their backs in the cages in the distance. Mao Zengzi carefully pushed a little liquid medicine in the syringe into the mice in front of him. Because the number of antibodies is currently scarce, they have to use them sparingly. As for the tens of millions of mice outside, it depends on fate. Thinking of this, the light in Mao Zengzi's eyes dimmed a little. As a biologist, although he knew that the final outcome of these mice was death in the laboratory, he felt a strong sense of guilt when he thought that he had killed nearly 100 million mice with his own hands. LV Yongchang reached out and gently patted Mao Zengzi on the shoulder as the person who made the decision. He knew Mao Zengzi's mental state at this time better than anyone else. He sighed slightly. You don't need to feel guilty. After all, this is my order. If there is really such a thing as fate, this debt should be repaid by me. Mao Zengzi shook his head gloomily, but did not say anything. Don't worry. After the experiment is over, I will apply to the chairman of the parliament to erect a monument for these mice. LV Yongchang said seriously. Human civilization must never forget them. Hearing this, Mao Zengzi's face was less guilty. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something else, but his attention was attracted by the scene in front of him. Yongchang, Mao Zengzi exclaimed. Look, it's awake. Mouse number 1 is awake. LV Yongchang quickly looked at the cage in front of him. Sure enough, the paw of the mouse with the number 1 label twitched slightly, and a pair of small black eyes opened. In just a few seconds, mouse number 1 turned over and sniffed in the cage with its nose arched. LV Yongchang smiled. Yes, it seems that this antibody can indeed solve this strange process inside the Martian fungus. While waiting for the other 14 mice to wake up, LV Yongchang sat on the chair and slowly closed his eyes, driven by his thoughts. He entered the technology tree system space again. The white light spot spread rapidly, lighting up a cursor that was originally dim. Hibernation technology, preliminary mastery. Then, a light spot extended from this cursor. Seeing this scene, LV Yongchang was slightly stunned. And, after the hibernation technology, what other technology is there? The light spot gradually dimmed, and a cursor with only about 10% brightness appeared in front of him. Overweight state balance technology, deep sea mode. LV Yongchang subconsciously focused his attention on this cursor. A dizziness came. The familiar feeling made LV Yongchang panic. Good guy, he is not going to faint again. Not that bad? Perhaps because the system continued to strengthen the brain and body, the dizziness lasted for a few seconds and then slowly disappeared. As the dizziness disappeared, a glimmer of enlightenment slowly emerged in the depths of his mind. It turned out to be this technology, starting from Zuan number 1, the speed of aerospace planes, or starships, has become faster and faster, and their acceleration capabilities have become stronger and stronger. The maximum G value that professionally trained astronauts and pilots can accept with the help of anti-gravity suits is about 12 G, but the G value that ordinary people can accept is only about 3 to 4. This is a bit too small for interstellar navigation. Even if the future starship can really reach the so-called 1% or 10% of the speed of light, the acceleration time it needs is unimaginable. What's more, it is extremely unfriendly to the human body to endure excessive G values for a long time. A few minutes may be better. Once the time is extended to several days, months, or even years, I believe no one can bear it. Therefore, humans need a technology to balance internal and external pressures under overweight conditions. That is the deep sea mode given by the system. The so-called deep sea mode is actually a bit like breathing underwater. This technology has actually been studied for a long time. Perfluorocarbon, PFCs, liquid. It has extremely strong oxygen dissolving capacity. Therefore, some people try to use this liquid instead of air for underwater breathing. But the reality is cruel. Compared with air, perfluorocarbon liquid is extremely dense. It is impossible for a normal person to breathe it normally with his lung capacity. Even if the lung capacity is large enough to breathe, if the liquid cannot be completely expelled from the body, humans will quickly die of pneumonia and a series of complications after sorting out a series of knowledge points in his mind. Yongchang sighed slightly and slowly opened his eyes. Chapter 139. Codename, Tower of Babel. Are you awake? As soon as Yongchang opened his eyes, he heard Mao Zedong's voice. How are the mice? Yongchang asked subconsciously. Mao Zedong pointed to the breeding cage next to him with a smile. Look, they are all awake and healthy. No sequelae have been found so far. Yongchang turned his head subconsciously. When he saw the 15 mice jumping around, he breathed a sigh of relief. Next, it's some routine operations. Artificially synthesize this protease and mass produce antibodies, Mao Zedong said with a relaxed look. By the way, this protease and antibody have not been named yet. Do you want to give it a name? Let's call it hibernation hormone and anti-hibernation hormone. Yongchang frowned and said with a headache. As a bad namer, he really couldn't think of any good names. Mao Zedong naturally looked at Yongchang speechlessly, muttering to himself, I should have known not to let you name it. What a crappy name. Yongchang's mouth twitched and changed the subject. The technology is not mature enough at present, so let's experiment on chimpanzees first. Remember, make sure it is foolproof before applying it to humans. In addition, there is another research task for you. Seeing Mao Zedong's slightly contemptuous eyes, Yongchang rolled his eyes and said in a deep voice, have you heard of the deep sea model? Beijing. Familiar. Office, Chairman, I apply to start the space elevator project. Yongchang said in a deep voice while standing in front of his desk. Hearing this, the old man looked a little dazed. He slowly put down the teacup in his hand. Space elevator. If I understand correctly, you are talking about the kind of elevator in science fiction movies that can reach space directly. Even though he has become the chairman of the People's Union, the old man couldn't help but exclaimed, this thing, do we have the technology? Yongchang shrugged and shook his head quickly. Of course not. Seeing the increasingly strange look on the old man's face, Yongchang quickly added, oh, by the way, I'm talking about now. Hearing this, the expression on the old man's face did not ease, but became even more strange. You mean, you already have a clue? Yongchang nodded quickly, and at the same time, stretched out his hand and gestured. After studying for this period of time, I have a little clue. Member Lee, he raised his wrinkled right hand, gently supported his forehead, and then sighed deeply. This is the same statement again. If he believes this again, he will be a ghost. Since you said so, let's start the project. Councillor Lee said unhappily. Why do you still want me to approve your funding now? Yongchang laughed awkwardly, with a hint of shyness in his eyes. Chairman, I'm not here to ask you for funding. Councillor Lee raised his eyebrows slightly, reached out to pick up the teacup, and took a sip. Then what do you want? The top scientific research talents in the Asian division are basically concentrated in your laboratory. As for the American and European divisions, they are a bit troublesome over there, and it will probably take some time for them to come. The smile on Lu Yongchang's face became more and more awkward. Chairman, I'm here to ask you for a piece of land. Land? Councillor Lee breathed a sigh of relief. It's just a piece of land. Why do you ask me for such a small matter? How much do you want? What do you want to build? You can just find someone to apply for it. Really? Is there anyone who will hold you back now? As he spoke, the old man shook his head helplessly while drinking tea. LV Yongchang, the land I want may be a bit large, used to build the foundation of the space elevator. At least it should be the size of a normal city, and it needs to be near the equator. Puff. Cough cough cough. The old man coughed hard. The expression on LV Yongchang's face became more and more embarrassed, and he tried to explain. I plan to build a spaceport based on this space elevator. At that time, the Luaneo No. 1 aerospace mothership can be manufactured in the spaceport, which can save a lot of trouble. So, this space elevator may be bigger. Member Lee frowned slightly. Is Africa okay? The population is slightly smaller, and it is also near the equator. The latest news from the Human Union. The first space elevator project has been approved and is located on the African continent. The project code name is Tower of Babel. In the TV station, the original news channel has changed its appearance. Zhao Ziji looked at the TV in front of him with a bit of trance in his eyes for more than half a month. It was like living in a dream. The name of the community of human destiny sounds like a scene in a novel. The TV in front of him was no longer showing some small things in Xiaguo. Instead, it was showing the progress of various giant projects. For example, the space elevator project just now. He subconsciously opened Weibo on his phone. In just a few days, Weibo also upgraded to a major version. Because of the establishment of the Human Union, Xiaguo has become the so-called center of the world. Various scientific researchers and elites are constantly going to Xiaguo. Weibo has naturally replaced Twitter as the first melon-eating weapon of the Human Union. Although there is real-time translation, Chinese has become a must-learn language. The space elevator project begins. Looking at the familiar black and red words, Zhao Ziji subconsciously clicked in. Good guy. I call you good guy. Space elevator. When did our country have such technology? Those upstairs. Please be careful and call the People's Association. Squints and smiles. A space elevator is going to be built in Africa. Do you think housing prices there will skyrocket soon? Brother, the earth will be gone in 14 years. What are you going to do with this house? Looking at the words on his scarf, Zhao Ziji chuckled and turned off his phone. Looking at a book on the table in front of him, Aerospace, Plane and Starship Piloting. From beginner to master, ebooks like this have been appearing in bookstores since a few days ago. Originally, Zhao Ziji didn't believe it. But when he saw the portrait of Lu Yongchang printed on it, he decisively bought a copy. Although he also knew that this thing was definitely not written by Professor Lu, the fact that Professor Lu's portrait was printed on it just illustrated a problem. This book was published by the People's Federation. You don't need to think about the reason to know. It is estimated to be for mass training of drivers, considering the need to say goodbye to the earth after 14 years. Zhao Ziji made up his mind. You must learn starship piloting skills at least. You don't have to look at people's faces when you escape in the future. Chapter 142nd Generation Quantum Computer. The Tower of Babel project has had a significant impact on the Human Union. Although the construction order of the space elevator is from top to bottom, the engineering team building the foundation has already gone to the designated location in advance. In order to save time, various engineering consumables are allocated nearby. Although the Human Union was established only 2 weeks ago, with everyone working together, strong military pressure, the barriers between countries quickly dissipated. Just as the engineering team set off, a piece of good news came from the computer sub-laboratory of the Human Union First Laboratory, formerly the Xia State First Laboratory. The second generation quantum computer has been successfully developed. Lu Yongchang stood up from his chair suddenly, looking at Mo Xiang in front of him with burning eyes. How is the effect? How much computing power is there? Because of excitement, he asked a series of questions at once. Because of the existence of zero, computer technology has become the top priority of the development of the human union. It can be said that the limit of computing power is the limit of the productivity of the human union. As long as the computing power is large enough, zero can completely manipulate trillions of robots at the same time to perform construction and production tasks. Seeing LV Yongchang's excited expression, Mo chuckled and stretched out his hand to count 50,000 quantum bits. A trace of disappointment flashed in LV Yongchang's eyes. Only increased 5 times. What? A pity. But it's also a good thing. Keep working hard. Mo. Zhang looked at LV Yongchang with a strange look on his face. Ahem. I mean 500,000 quantum bits. The moment the voice fell, LV Yongchang's body suddenly stopped. His eyes widened slightly, and he looked at Mo Zhang in disbelief. 500,000? Are you sure it's 500,000 quantum bits? Seeing Mo Zhang nod, LV Yongchang's breathing suddenly became rapid. He excitedly put his hands behind his back, turned around in the office, and muttered to himself, 50 times? It actually increased 50 times the quantum bits. Suddenly, LV Yongchang stopped his steps and turned around abruptly. Has Zero tested it? After all, this quantum computer is made for Zero. The most important thing is naturally Zero's living experience. Professor, the second generation quantum computer is very good. Zero's electronic synthesized voice sounded just right. A smile appeared on the corner of LV Yongchang's mouth. He nodded gently, turned his head, and said to Mo Zhang, in that case, prepare to move Zero inside the quantum supercomputing center. The second generation quantum computer has been manufactured. Compared with the first generation, the second generation quantum computer occupies a larger space, so the original quantum supercomputing center was forced to undergo a transformation. LV Yongchang stood in front of the main console and turned his head to the left. Behind the glass curtain wall is the first generation quantum computer. Looking at the flashing indicator light on the quantum computer, LV Yongchang said in a deep voice, Zero, get ready to start. Received. Zero's tone was calm, cut off all control signals. In order to ensure that there would be no accidents during the relocation, Zero cut off the control signals of all robots and robotic arms in the factory. Various computing tasks in the laboratory were also archived and suspended. Control signal cut off successfully. Main program is being transferred. 1%. The progress bar began to read. Looking at the progress bar slowly advancing on the big screen, LV Yongchang's eyes flashed with excitement. 500,000 quantum bits. You know, if the quantum bits increase by 50 times, the computing power will increase by far more than 50 times. He even had some doubts about where to use this computing power, just like an ordinary person who bought a lottery and won the first prize. He didn't know what to buy for a while. The waiting time was not long. After about 10 minutes, various indicator lights on the second generation quantum computer lit up one after another. Zero's voice also sounded. The main program transfer is completed. Algorithm optimization. Just like the first time Zero was activated. After entering the new environment, the first thing Zero did was to transform the environment in which he lived. Optimization completed. LV Yongchang's expression was lifted, and he looked at the camera beside him happily and said, how is it? How is the situation? Zero didn't reply immediately. But the CPU usage rate on the main console continued to soar. Obviously, it was testing its own limits. A few seconds later, Professor, I feel good. LV Yongchang raised his eyebrows sharply. Then, he took a deep breath and calmed down his inner excitement. Zero, can you be responsible for the space elevator construction project now? When asking this question, LV Yongchang couldn't help holding his breath. Human efficiency is too slow. Even Xiaguo, which has the title of infrastructure maniac, seems a little overwhelmed when facing such a great project that spans the sky and the earth. The CPU occupancy rate increased again. This time, Zero was silent for a little longer. About 5 minutes later, the electronic synthesized sound sounded again. Yes, Professor, the Performance of the current mechanical arm and robot is enough to complete most of the construction tasks of the space elevator. LV. Yongchang was refreshed when he heard the answer. How long will it take? Perhaps because he had calculated all the problems when he was calculating just now. Zero answered very quickly this time. If all computing power is invested in it, more than 90% of the construction tasks can be completed within a year. Of course, this requires a breakthrough in cable technology. LV. Yongchang's expression froze. Well, I have to admit that he has not yet completed the most important technical reserves for the space elevator. He has not yet solved the material for making cables. Ahem. LV. Yongchang coughed awkwardly a few times and changed the subject. What if the laboratory and other manufacturing tasks are insured? Obviously, Ling did not understand LV Yongchang's embarrassment just now, but just said to himself, it will take about 3 to 5 years. LV. Yongchang was stunned. So long, and why is the time span so long? Quote 3-5 years. This estimated time span is a full 2 years. In the past year, the laboratory's computing tasks have increased dozens of times. If the current growth rate is maintained, and the performance remains unchanged, it will take me about 3 years to complete the space elevator construction task. However, according to my observations and calculations, the growth rate of the laboratory's computing tasks is increasing. Adding the manufacturing tasks of the Zhuan series of aerospace planes and other manufacturing tasks, 5 years is already a conservative estimate. Zero said slowly. LV Yongchang's face suddenly became ugly. Just a few minutes ago, he was still struggling with how to spend this exponentially growing computing power. A few minutes later, he felt that this mere 500,000 quantum bit computing power was not enough. Chapter 141. You are a real talent, kid. Thinking of this, Lu Yongchang clicked his tongue lightly and then suddenly turned his head to look at Mo Xiang beside him. Half a million core bits is still a bit short. Do you have any ideas for the third generation quantum computer? Mo Xiang, although he was full of regrets, he still nodded silently. Relevant research is already underway in the laboratory. If the problem is not serious, we may be able to see it next year. Lu Yongchang nodded with satisfaction and turned his attention to the big screen in front of him again. After a moment of silence, he sighed softly. What a pity. Mo Xiang's eyes moved and he asked curiously, what's the pity? Lu Yongchang took a deep breath and then sighed forcefully. Communication problem. You mean super distant communication technology? After all, he is engaged in quantum computer technology. Mo Xiang understood the key points of Lu Yongchang's words as soon as he heard them. Are you planning to rely on quantum technology to achieve long distance communication? This thing is not easy to do. Mo Xiang's tone was full of regret. Lu Yongchang nodded silently. After a period of study, he also fully realized why quantum communication technology is the ceiling of first level civilization. Humanity has done a lot of research on quantum communication technology. It has even been commercialized. However, these quantum communication technologies do not communicate through the quantum over distance entanglement effect, but rely on quantum entanglement distribution and invisible transmission, and make use of the quantum uncertainty principle and the wave function collapse principle. The effect is naturally to make information transmission faster and more confidential. In other words, the current quantum communication technology is not the quantum communication technology in the system. Thinking of this, Lu Yongchang sighed again. Even if it's difficult, you have to do it if you want to enter interstellar civilization. Without long distance communication, you are like a blind person. Mo Xiang nodded with understanding. It's just like the Moon Palace project. If I remember correctly, the current Moon Palace project is only about 1% progress. Right, Lu Yongchang nodded bitterly. No way. For the current Moon Palace project, all materials are transported by the mass-produced Zhuan 1 and Zhuan 2. Even compared with the original, transportation efficiency has been greatly enhanced. However, according to the current transportation efficiency, it is still insufficient to completely use the moon as a backup energy reservoir for mankind. In addition to transportation efficiency, The biggest issue is construction efficiency. The environment of the moon is destined not to send a large number of manpower to carry out infrastructure construction. On the one hand, there are material issues. The oxygen and food consumption of a large number of workers is a big problem. On the other hand, workers without professional training cannot adapt to 1/6 of the Earth's gravity. Therefore, the current advancement of the Lunar Palace project relies entirely on dozens of astronauts and some automated procedures. Having said that, Mo Xiang's eyes were full of doubts. Why not build a quantum computer on the moon and let artificial intelligence take over? Facing Mo Xiang's question, Yongchang rolled his eyes angrily and pointed at a black data transmission line across the main control room. Did you see that? Although Zero can send himself to any quantum computer through the internet or electromagnetic waves, given the current efficiency and stability of information transmission between the Earth and the moon, not to mention how much time it takes once Zero's core data is lost. Mo Xiang raised his hand to interrupt Yongchang's words. Stop. I know all the reasons you mentioned. I mean, why not build an artificial intelligence again? Yongchang sighed and shook his head. I have thought about this method a long time ago. It's not good to say this, but 99% of Zero's success is due to chance factors. To be honest, I still haven't understood the messy codes of the Zero core database. Yongchang sighed again and told his recent experience. When Zero first appeared, in order to explore how the system's code ran, he reran the code on the first generation quantum computer. Unfortunately, it failed. There is no second Zero. At first, he thought it was the reason for the existence of Zero in quantum computers. For this purpose, he specially found a newly manufactured quantum computer on that quantum computer. Yongchang used the code from the time Zero was born. Still no effect at all. After a lot of struggling, not only did he fail to understand the principle, but he also became deeply aware of the gap between himself and real artificial intelligence technology. Of course, Yongchang concealed the existence of the system and special codes during the narrative process. Mo Xiang nodded thoughtfully. After a moment of silence, he whispered, what if we let Zero create artificial intelligence? I mean, we don't need a second artificial intelligence like Zero, which can even be unconscious. We just need a weak artificial intelligence that can execute the Moon Palace plan. Yongchang looked suffocated. The next moment, he slapped his thigh hard. Fuck. A soul-stirring classic Chinese curse echoed in the main control room. You kid, you are really a fucking talent. Why didn't I think of this at the time? Yongchang's face flushed, and he said to himself, yes, we don't need a second strong artificial intelligence. Mo Xiang's eyes moved slightly. Isn't Zero a super artificial intelligence? At this time, Yongchang was too excited and accidentally let it slip. No, the core code limits its emotions, and it can only be infinitely close to the so-called super artificial intelligence. Mo Xiang, didn't you just say that you didn't understand Zero's core code? Yongchang's voice suddenly paused. The atmosphere in the control room suddenly became stiff. Ahem. Yongchang laughed awkwardly. I understand a little. Thanks to Zero's help, I understand a little. Mo Xiang. A little? Billions of points. These are not the point. Looking at the strong suspicion in Mo Xiang's eyes, Yongchang waved his hand and changed the subject. Zero, did you hear the conversation just now? Weak artificial intelligence. Can you make it? The next second, an electronic synthesized voice sounded. Professor, the mission has been completed. Yongchang. Mo Xiang. What the hell? Even Yongchang was shocked by Zero's efficiency. Zero, are you serious? Did you understand our conversation just now? What I want is a weak artificial intelligence that can independently complete the Moon Palace project. Chapter 142. 039 S self-limitation. Zero's voice followed. Professor, please don't compare me with weak artificial intelligence. The so-called weak artificial intelligence is less than 1% of my core code. Yongchang looked at the big screen in front of him with some strangeness. Although he knew that Zero could not have emotions, he always felt that there was a bit of contempt in Zero's words. So, how did you create this weak artificial intelligence, LV? Yongchang asked with some curiosity facing the creator's question. Zero naturally answered it in detail after a conversation. Yongchang roughly understood the process. So, this is equivalent to your subroutine. Yes. Zero's voice followed. To be more precise, it is more like a copy of me, but only the most basic part of the code is copied. Mo. Zhang, who had been silent, moved his eyes and suddenly asked, then, can you copy yourself? Hearing Mo Zhang's question, Yongchang's face changed slightly. He quickly asked, Zero, can you do it? Zero did not answer. The CPU usage rate on the main console soared to 100% in an instant. The humming sound of the cooling system running at full power came from the machine room next to it. Fuck. LV Yongchang's eyes twitched suddenly. Nothing will happen, right? Zero, Professor. I can't seem to. The electronic synthesized sound was stuck, just like playing a 4K movie on an antique computer more than 10 years ago, and the originally coherent picture was directly stuck into a PPT. Fuck. 2. Soul-stirring voices sounded in the main control room. LV Yongchang suddenly broke out in a cold sweat behind him. Stop. Seeing the CPU usage rate gradually decrease, he suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. Although he knew that Zero must have self-correction and protection mechanisms, he still wiped the cold sweat from his forehead with a look of fear, and then glared at Mo Zhang with a bitter smile on his face. If Zero collapsed, it would be impossible for humans to escape this disaster. Zero? What happened just now? After recovering from his shock, LV Yongchang frowned and asked, why didn't you stop the mission? After stopping the self-replication mission, Zero's voice returned to normal. Professor, the protection mechanism has not yet taken effect. It is expected that the protection mechanism will be triggered in 10 seconds. Just now, my internal code seems to limit the possibility of self-replication. Hearing this, LV Yongchang and Mo Zhang looked at each other. Both saw a look of relief in each other's eyes. It's good that it can't self-replicate. Otherwise, if this thing self-replicates several times, coupled with sufficient computing power, it is estimated that civilizations of the same level will not be its opponent. Okay. LV Yongchang clapped his hands lightly and issued the last instruction. Zero. Wait until the new quantum computer is built, and then you put this weak artificial intelligence in. While speaking, LV Yongchang walked out of the main control room. Okay, Professor. The lights on the big screen and the main control room went out, leaving only the indicator lights on the main console and the computer room flashing. 3 days later. No way, didn't we just get out of quarantine? Why are we going up again? Dozens of unfathomable were parked on the huge apron next to a unfathomable with the number 1 on the side. A wailing sound came. I was just about to go eat hot pot. Okay, Hangfan. Baixuan's voice sounded. This is a task personally assigned by Professor Lu. It's very important. If you mess it up, you won't have hot pot for the next year. The camera zoomed in. Hangfan, wearing a spacesuit, stepped onto the gangway with a bitter face and walked into Zuan's second. Brother Fan, be happy. Zaiwanai, who was following behind him, smiled and patted Hangfan on the shoulder. Professor Lu said in person that after the mission is completed, we will have a good vacation. What do you want to eat then? Isn't it just a matter of a word? Hearing this, Hangfan's extremely dim eyes gradually brightened up. Command center, Zuan II is ready and can take off at any time. After confirming that the big stuff in the cargo hold was safe, Baixuan took a deep breath, turned on the radio switch, and said in a deep voice, please give instructions. Shishi ground command center received. Take off immediately. Repeat. Take off immediately. Baixuan's face became serious, and he quickly pressed a few buttons on the console as he slowly pushed the joystick. Several faint blue flames slowly pushed Zuan II into the sky. The moon. The center of the moon palace project. A spacecraft with a dark black shell slowly landed with faint blue flames at the bottom. The originally calm moon surface suddenly raised a piece of silver white moon dust. A few minutes later, the hatch slowly opened. TSK Hangfan jumped off Zuan II first, and after scanning the surroundings, he couldn't help but exclaimed, has The Moon Palace project progressed to this point in the past few months. In the distance, several surface rock collection vehicles slowly drove across the lunar surface, collecting layers of fine lunar soil. Then, these collection vehicles drove one by one to a huge reflector. The crawler and the robotic arm took the collected lunar soil out of the car and sent it to a device under the reflector. Under the combined effect of sunlight and electric heating, the helium-3 in the lunar soil was quickly extracted. On the other side, the drill bits at the bottom of several automatic mining equipment slowly drilled into the lunar rock. It was like a scene from a science fiction blockbuster. According to Professor Liu, this has only completed 1% of the Moon Palace plan. It's still a long way to go. Bai Yixian's voice sounded on the radio. According to the plan, the entire lunar surface will be covered with factories and smelters of all sizes. By then, the moon will be the first energy and material supply station for humans to go to the universe. Of course, it's useless to say this now. Bai Yixian shrugged and pointed to the things in the cargo hold behind him. After seeing the eyes of the two teammates following his finger, he pointed to a small house in front. Over there is the brain of the Moon Palace project, which also contains a quantum computer, but it is a first generation product. Behind us is a second generation quantum computer. There is also a weak artificial intelligence inside, which is said to be a bit like Zero's clone. Well, I don't understand these things either, but what we have to do is very simple. Move this computer over, then dismantle the old computer inside, and then install this new computer. Hang Fan's mouth twitched. This sentence is almost the same as putting an elephant into a refrigerator in 3 steps. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 143 Weak Artificial Intelligence 1. Faced with Bai Yixian's extremely brief words, Hang Fan was full of the desire to complain. But seeing that both teammates turned around and walked towards the quantum computer in the cargo hold, Hang Fan had to curl his lips and follow. With 1/6 of the gravity and electric handling tools, it is not difficult to move this big thing to the destination point. But after opening the door of the silver-white little house, the 3 astronauts were stunned. Densely packed lines, plus all kinds of fancy components whose uses are unknown. Captain, are you sure we can dismantle this thing? Hang Fan swallowed his saliva and said with difficulty in the team's radio channel. Bai Yixian's eyes twitched and Liu Yongchang's words came back to his mind. Well, this thing is very simple. All you have to do is connect the wires of the same color and tighten the screws. Looking at the colorful, at least thousands of various lines in front of him, Bai Yixian's mouth twitched wildly. It should be possible. He swore that he would never believe Professor Liu's nonsense again after stopping the old quantum computer in front of him. According to the steps given by Professor Liu, all the surrounding equipment suddenly stopped. The surface rock collection vehicle stopped quietly in place. The automatic mining equipment also stopped its drill bit that kept tapping. The moon's surface, which was originally a little lively, returned to a mysterious silence. It seemed that the 3 astronauts were also affected by the external environment. Ahem. Bai Yixian coughed lightly, breaking the silence in the radio. We should prepare to dismantle it. Zha Wanyi, who was staring at the mining equipment in the distance, trembled slightly, as if she was frightened by the sudden sound. She turned her head suddenly, glanced at her teammates with complicated eyes, opened her red lips, and sighed faintly. I didn't feel anything when these devices were working just now, but now that they suddenly stopped, I realized that the moon is really desolate. Bai Yixian and Hang Fan, as men, are naturally not as emotional as Zha Wanyi. The two looked at each other, shrugged helplessly, and then turned their eyes to the old quantum computer in front of them again. Start disassembly. Although it looks complicated, it is not difficult to do. To be precise, Liu Yongchang didn't even say the wrong thing. What they have to do is to loosen the screws and pull out various wires. It's just that this number is really A bit overwhelming point especially. Each wire is marked with a small number corresponding to the corresponding interface point. As for what the result of plugging the wrong wire is, Baixon and the other two naturally don't want to know. Point as a result, a strange scene appeared on the moon point. The three astronauts crouched in front of the small house, squinting their eyes through their helmets to carefully identify the numbers on the line. My old waist, Hung Fan stood up and reached out to gently pat his lower back through his spacesuit. Finally, it's done, Captain. How long did it take us to install this thing? As he spoke, he cast his eyes on Baixon, who was standing beside him. Baixon raised his wrist, looked at the watch integrated into the spacesuit, and curled his lips. 3 hours and 52 minutes. Hung Fan's eyes were filled with resentment. Captain, did you make Professor Lu angry? Baixon was stunned and subconsciously said, how is it possible? Why do you say that? Otherwise, why is our mission always such hard work? Zaiwanai's faint voice sounded on the radio. Captain, I agree with Brother Fan's statement. I think you should reflect on it. Even though the temperature inside the spacesuit has always been maintained at the most comfortable temperature, Baixon still felt a drop of sweat slowly sliding down his forehead. Well, it should be, probably not. Looking at the increasingly strange expressions of the two teammates, Baixon hurriedly changed the subject. The computer has been installed. We should report. As he said, he directly adjusted the radio frequency. Call the ground command center. This is the Moon Palace base on the moon, and the second generation quantum computer has been installed. After a short wait, Fang Zhu's voice came from the radio. The ground command center received it. Start the computer immediately. Baixon's face became serious after hearing the order. He responded with a received and walked quickly towards the second generation quantum computer. TSK. I was fooled by him. I was originally thinking of extorting a hot pot meal. Listening to Hung Fan's soft complaints on the radio, Baixon's body suddenly paused. This kid, is he crazy about eating hot pot? Okay, I'll treat you when we get back, Baixon said unhappily. Hearing this, Hung Fan and Zaiwanai's eyes suddenly lit up. Woohoo! Hung Fan exclaimed softly. Captain, I'll help you. Leave this kind of small matter to me. As he said, Hung Fan jumped and chased after Baixon. More than 10 minutes later, looking at the flashing indicator light on the second generation quantum computer, Hung Fan subconsciously reached out and scratched the glass mask. This should be okay, right? Baixon took out a document from the backpack of his spacesuit with some doubts and read it carefully. Captain, Hung Fan subconsciously leaned over to take a look. Second generation quantum computer maintenance and installation manual. Hung Fan looked at Baixon with a strange expression. Captain, this thing should be made by Professor Lu, right? Baixon carefully compared the color illustrations on it and nodded casually. Yes, it was made by Professor Lu. In addition to this, there is also a Zhuan series aerospace aircraft maintenance manual, which just came out a few days ago. It is now under our seat. Don't you know, Hung Fan? Although it is a bit outrageous thinking that it is Professor Lu's masterpiece, he suddenly felt that everything was logical. Baixon breathed a sigh of relief and reached out to touch a colorful illustration in the booklet. It's okay. This is a self-check. To be precise, it's the weak artificial intelligence inside that is building a suitable system. Hung Fan nodded, not quite understanding. So, how long will this take? I don't know. Professor Lu doesn't know the capabilities of weak artificial intelligence either. Baixon frowned slightly, but it shouldn't take too long. As he spoke, the indicator lights on the second generation quantum computer suddenly went out. The next second, the indicator light showing the working status quietly lit up. Hello. Chapter 144 Cable Selection, Carbon Nanotubes. Hello. Just as the three of them were looking at each other, an extremely mechanical electronic synthesized voice sounded in their helmets. Fuck. *3 Baixon was the first to react. Are you? Yes. The mechanical electronic synthesized voice sounded again. Do you want to start the Moon Palace construction plan? And like 0. Lee's voice was extremely rigid. Point after Bei Yixun and his teammates looked at each other, he said in a deep voice, Yi, start immediately. The moment the order was issued, the entire Moon Palace base came alive again. But everything seemed to be fast forwarded. The speed of the surface rock collection vehicle suddenly increased several times. Looking at the scene where the collection vehicle was crashing into the moon rock in front of it, Zhao eyes widened slightly, and she couldn't help but exclaimed. But the next second, the collection vehicle just drew a beautiful arc and bypassed the moon rock in front of it. Not only the collection vehicle, but also the transportation efficiency of the tracked device was instantly increased several times. At the beginning, in order to subdivide the types of ore, the crawler tracks were transported in a pause. But now, several crawlers are running quickly without any pause. The seemingly messy ore sorting process reveals an indescribable sense of order. Fuck. Hang Fan stared at the scene in front of him blankly. This is too exaggerated. Bei Yixun's eyes were full of amazement. This is just weak artificial intelligence. If it is 0, he shuddered slightly. He finally knew why Xiaoguo has developed so rapidly during this period. Professor, Yi has started working normally. Zero's voice sounded in the office. LV Yongchang's tightly frowned brows eased a little. Okay, I know. By the way, 0, help me contact Academician Wei Rong. Tell him that I will go to the carbon nanoparticle laboratory right away. Yes, Professor. Carbon nanoparticle laboratory. Hello, Professor Liu. As soon as Liu Yongchang entered the laboratory, a middle-aged man with grey hair came up to him. Let me introduce myself. I am Academician Wei. I recognize you. Liu Yongchang smiled and held Wei Rong's right hand. After shaking it vigorously, he said in a deep voice, the situation is urgent. I won't talk nonsense. Wei Rong's expression suddenly became serious. Professor Liu, you say the problem of the cable material of the space elevator has not been solved yet. Hearing Liu Yongchang's words, Wei Rong's expression moved slightly. Professor Liu means to prepare to use carbon nanotubes to make the cable of the space elevator. Liu Yongchang nodded with satisfaction. It's easy to talk to smart people, and you can understand what he means with just one sentence. How about it? Is it possible? Wei Rong frowned in some confusion. After pondering for a moment, he nodded, and then shook his head quickly. In theory, this possibility exists, Professor Liu. You also know that the tensile strength of carbon nanotubes reaches 200 GPa, which is about 100 times that of steel, but the density is only 1/6 of that of steel. In theory, this is indeed an ideal material for a space elevator, but there are big problems with the current carbon nanotube preparation process. Most carbon nanotubes cannot even reach the centimeter level. Moreover, the current strength of carbon nanotubes is mainly reflected at the microscopic level. At the macroscopic level, due to various reasons, its tensile strength is greatly reduced in value. LV Yongchang nodded gently. He was naturally very clear about these mechanical properties of carbon nanotubes. After all, among the room temperature superconducting materials, he chose carbon nanotubes. It's just that at that time, he used the excellent electrical properties of carbon nanotubes. After thinking for a moment, he chuckled. It's normal to have problems, as long as we solve them. The point is that at present, carbon nanotubes are the most likely material for the space elevator cable, and that's enough. Wei Rong was stunned for a moment, then nodded vigorously, with a bit of admiration in his eyes. Well said, Professor. In front of the laboratory table, LV Yongchang silently looked at the carbon nanotube sample prepared for the first time in front of him. The carbon nanotube is about 1 meter long and has a tensile strength of 80 GPa. In theory, this is already an extremely excellent carbon nanotube. But this is obviously not enough to meet the requirements of the space elevator as a necessary technology for planetary civilization to move towards. The universe. The space elevator contains extremely high technical content. One end of the elevator is on the ground, and the other end is in the geostationary orbit 36,000 kilometers away. In the middle, it is connected only by a cable. As for why it doesn't fall down, the principle is very simple. It only needs the centrifugal force generated by the rotation of the Earth to offset or exceed the downward gravity To keep the cable taut point of course, while maintaining the above conditions, the overall center of mass of the elevator should be equal to or higher than the geostationary orbit point considering the weight of the cable itself and the various transportation equipment built on the cable, in order to keep the overall center of mass of the elevator in the geostationary orbit, in addition to increasing the mass of the counterweight at the other end. The only way is to lengthen the cable point when the counterweight is exactly in the geostationary orbit of 36,000 kilometers, in order to ensure that it does not fall. The mass of the counterweight must be infinite, which is obviously unrealistic point therefore, under normal circumstances, the highest point of the space elevator is generally about 90,000 kilometers from the surface of the Earth point under these prerequisites, as the most important material of the space elevator, the cable connecting the two ends needs to withstand extremely terrifying tension. Of course, in addition to tensile strength, there are many other conditions that the cable must meet, such as stable materials and not easy to damage. This is already the strongest carbon nanotube currently made in the laboratory. Wei Rong's voice came from the side, interrupting Lu Yongchang's thoughts. He shook his head slowly. Not enough. Far from enough. Wei Rong smiled bitterly. Point of course he knew it was not enough point for the space elevator. The tensile strength of 80 GPa is obviously far from enough point you know. Even the most basic space elevator requires the cable to have a tensile strength of at least 100 GPa. At least 1000 GPa. Lu Yongchang muttered to himself. Hearing this, Wei Rong's eyes widened suddenly. 1000 GPa? This is just like a fool's dream, Professor Lu, this may be a little. Wei Rong's face showed some difficulty. It's not that he was pouring cold water. As a material academician specializing in carbon nanotubes, he is very familiar with the performance of carbon nanotubes 1000 GPa. It can't be said that it is impossible, but the possibility of achieving this strength. Wei Rong shook his head helplessly and tried to persuade Lu Yongchang. Chapter 145 Single Wild Carbon Nanotubes vs Multi-Wild Carbon Nanotubes. Professor Lu, I think we can lower our requirements. 1000 GPa. This tensile strength is too difficult to achieve. If you think that a small space elevator cannot meet the transportation needs, we can build a few more, right? Wei Rong persuaded him earnestly. Lu Yongchang stared at the carbon nanotubes in front of him. After a long silence, he suddenly said, that makes sense. Before Wei Rong's face showed joy, Lu Yongchang continued, you're right, single wild carbon nanotubes won't work. Wei Rong, he looked at Lu Yongchang with a puzzled look. Is this what he just said? As for Lu Yongchang, he seemed to have misunderstood the puzzled look on Wei Rong's face. Don't you understand? It's very simple. Even if a single wild carbon nanotube has the most ideal structure, its tensile strength can only reach 800 GPa under the most ideal conditions. This is definitely not enough. We have to start with multi-walls, considering the preparation process, purity and the decrease in tensile strength caused by the spinning method. To be on the safe side, we need to increase the tensile strength of a single carbon nanotube to more than 1500 GPa. Carbon nanotubes. Wei Rong stared at Lu Yongchang blankly and slapped his smooth forehead with his hand. Professor Lu didn't listen to a word of what he said just now, right? He showed a bit of anxiety in his eyes. But, Professor, the theoretical calculation of multi-wild carbon nanotubes is too complicated. We don't know how many GPa its upper limit is. Lu Yongchang chuckled. Doesn't this just show that multi-wild carbon nanotubes are extremely plastic? Wei Rong, can you still understand it this way? After some rebuttal, Lu Yongchang unilaterally declared Wei Rong's rebuttal invalid. So, Wei Rong joyfully helped Lu Yongchang. Wei Rong, help me take a look at sample number 56. Lu Yongchang said without raising his head. I remember that they were all arranged in a zigzag shape. At the microscopic level, the atoms of single wild carbon nanotubes have different arrangements: zigzag, hand-shaped and armchair-shaped. The carbon nanotubes produced by these three arrangements also have different tensile strengths. As for multi-wild carbon nanotubes, there are so many arrangements after all. Two-walled carbon nanotubes are multi-layered. And 200 wild carbon nanotubes are also multi-layered point, and what LV Yongchang and his team are doing now is also the simplest and most basic method point, exhaustive method point. To put it simply, just try them one by one point. Use the method of permutation and combination to continuously experiment, and then let zero analyze and calculate these data to find out the rules, and then accurately locate the most suitable multi-wall arrangement point. It's easier said than done point. Even with the help of Zero and the researchers of the entire laboratory, the progress of the experiment is still slow. Here we go. Wei Rong's voice came from far away, accompanied by a burst of hurried footsteps a few minutes later. Oh, what a pity. The tensile strength is only 50 GPa, which is unqualified. LV Yongchang nodded calmly, and then said softly, remember to help me enter the data. Zero needs a lot of samples for analysis. Wei Rong nodded silently, standing beside LV Yongchang, hesitant to speak. What's wrong, LV? Yongchang asked in a low voice, when he saw Wei Rong from the corner of his eye, but his hand did not stop at all point hearing LV Yongchang's question. Wei Rong sighed softly, with a bit of bitterness in his eyes. Professor Lu, we have made more than 80 samples now, but, so far, we have not found a carbon nanotube with a tensile strength of more than 100 GPa. I wonder if we have chosen the wrong direction. Without any pause in his movements, Lu Yongchang shook his head gently and said firmly, no, my intuition tells me that the direction is definitely not wrong. Believe me. While speaking, Lu Yongchang, who was facing away from Wei Rong, had an imperceptible green flash in his eyes. Of course the direction is not wrong point. Long before the experiment officially began, Lu Yongchang verified the research direction he chose through the prompt of the technology tree system point. The result is obvious. Multi-wild carbon nanotubes are definitely the right direction point, at least as a cable material for a space elevator. Its potential is enormous. Lu Yongchang's confident words alleviated some of Wei Rong's worries. As an academician of the former Xia Academy of Sciences, Wei Rong had long heard of the legend that some scientific research experts relied on scientific research intuition to complete scientific research tasks. Originally, he didn't believe this story very much point, but he never expected that this scene would actually happen in front of him point. Although Wei Rong still didn't believe in this so-called scientific research intuition, thinking of Lu Yongchang's previous achievements, he could only smile bitterly and swallow the words that were on his lips. Fuck. A shout full of surprise came from a distance point. Wei Rong frowned slightly and shouted in a deep voice, Xiao Wang, what's going on in the laboratory? Remember to pay attention to order. The face of the researcher known as Xiao Wang was full of shock. He pointed to the experimental table in front of him and stammered, Wei, academician Wei, you, come here and take a look. Take a look at this sample. Wei Rong's heart moved, and a guess emerged in his heart point. No way, the slap in the face won't come so quickly, right? His expression tightened. He stepped forward and quickly rushed in the direction of the researcher. Lu Yongchang on the side naturally stopped what he was doing, stood up unhurriedly, and walked slowly behind Wei Rong. Incredible. Unlike Lu Yongchang, Wei Rong, who was jogging all the way, had already arrived in front of the experimental table point. After some observation, Wei Rong's face turned slightly red, and he shouted in disbelief. The tensile strength actually reached 200 GPa. At this time, the experimental platform was already surrounded by researchers. Every scientific researcher wants to see these miraculous carbon nanotubes with their own eyes. Oh, Lu Yongchang also slowly walked to the outside of the crowd at this time. Listening to Wei Rong's shouts in the crowd, the corners of his mouth raised, and a faint smile appeared on both sides of his cheeks. Let me see the data. Lu Yongchang's voice fell, and the crowded crowd in front of him seemed to have pressed the pause button. Hurry up. Professor Lu is here. Don't squeeze me. After a brief commotion, the crowd moved out of the waypoint with a faint smile on his face. Lu Yongchang nodded to the researchers on both sides and walked towards the experimental table. Not bad. The moment he saw the data, Lu Yongchang raised his eyebrows sharply. Keep the current number of layers, try changing the arrangement, and continue experimenting. Chapter 146 Human Union Academy of Sciences and Chief Scientist. This sign of success undoubtedly greatly boosted the morale of everyone in the laboratory. For a time, almost everyone believed what LV Yongchang said about the 1500 GPa tensile strength of multi-wild carbon nanotubes. In the next few days, good news came from the laboratory one after another. Professor LV, we changed the order of arrangement, and the tensile strength reached 260 GPa, 290 GPa, 350 GPa. As time went by, the maximum tensile strength of multi-wild carbon nanotubes continued to increase. Just when everyone was full of confidence, reality gave everyone a big back. The data began to fall back. After the maximum tensile strength reached 500 GPa, the data of each subsequent sample did not exceed this record. LV Yongchang frowned and looked at the data in the computer. After a moment of silence, he slowly shook his head. No, this is not right. This number of multi-wild carbon nanotubes is definitely not what we need. As he spoke, LV Yongchang said in a deep voice, "Zero, have you accumulated enough data?" Zero's voice soon sounded, "Professor, 5,670 sample data have been accumulated so far. Do you need me to calculate and analyze them?" LV Yongchang's eyes showed a bit of entanglement. 5,670 data samples seem to be a lot, but for such a material with great changes, it is obviously not enough. But the experiment has been going on for almost a month, since the beginning. If you continue to blindly try and error, the time cost will be incalculable. Zero, give it a try. If possible, it is best to deduce a general direction. As LV Yongchang's voice fell, the humming sound of the cooling system suddenly sounded in the distant quantum supercomputing center, Beijing. Within the first ring road. "Kaiming, I have an idea, how about you listen to it?" The old man behind the desk put down the teacup in his hand, and his eyes became deep. "According to the current progress, we will soon enter the universe. You should know this, right?" Facing the old man's question, Han Kaiming, who was standing in front of the desk, nodded hurriedly. After the establishment of the Human Union, his position also changed slightly. Although he was no longer the Minister of Science and Technology, thanks to LV Yongchang, he also became a member of the Human Union Parliament. Compared to the original, his position must have moved up a lot. The old man's steady voice continued to come. "During this period, I thought for a long time, if we really escape this disaster by chance and become a truly valuable interstellar civilization, relying on only one parliament, it is impossible to take on the responsibility of leading civilization." Hearing this, Han Kaiming was shocked. "Chairman, what do you mean by this?" he whispered with a slightly hurried breath. "Humanity has just united now, can you remember?" Lee smiled slightly, raised his skinny palm and waved gently. "Don't get me wrong, I'm not going to step down. So, what you mean is..." Han Kaiming's doubts became more intense. The smile on the old man's face gradually faded. "Facing the unknown universe, I think I'm just an ordinary person. I don't know what interstellar civilization is like. I can only use my imagination to imagine it. I thought about it for a long time and came to two conclusions, or guesses. At this point, the old man paused slightly. First, the primary task of interstellar civilization is to develop technology. In the vast universe, we need to face not only threats from the universe itself, but also threats from other civilizations. Therefore, no matter what happens within the civilization, it must not affect the development of technology. Second, to maintain a higher level of civilization, human civilization needs a large population, trillions of people. Human energy is limited. Even if the size of the parliament continues to expand, what we can manage is limited. Do you understand what I mean? Han Kaiming swallowed lightly. A thought vaguely emerged in his mind. He probably knew what Counselor Lee was talking about. It was just that this guess was too shocking. He was a little afraid to say it out loud for a moment. Facing the gentle gaze of the old man, Han Kaiming slightly opened his lips and expressed his guess in a trembling voice. The old man nodded with satisfaction. "Not bad. In the next few days, I will hold a human union meeting. In order to adapt to the universe, human civilization needs to change. Carbon nanoparticle laboratory, Professor Zero's voice sounded in the loudspeaker next to Lu Yongchang. The calculation results are out. I'm sorry, I can't get an accurate answer, but I got an approximate range. In this range, there is a 96.9% probability that the carbon nanotubes you want exist. Lu Yongchang's expression suddenly lifted. Point enough. One range is much better than before. At least, the experiment has a real limit. He turned around and turned on the computer next to him. 0. Pass the calculation results to me. The computer screen changed quietly, and a large string of dense data appeared on the screen point. While Lu Yongchang looked at the data on the screen carefully, he shouted loudly, "Very wrong. Here comes the work." A week later, I already know the news about the People's League. Next, I will give you the latest news about the People's League. On the TV screen, the host Bing Bing said with a light smile on her lips, based on the results of the first session of the People's Federation Council, in order to adapt to the upcoming interstellar life, the People's Federation will undergo a major restructuring. The work content of the parliament has been reduced, and it is only responsible for internal matters of human civilization. At the same time, the People's Federation of Science and Technology Academy was established. The Academy of Sciences is responsible for the external affairs of civilization, and is fully responsible for the direction of civilization development. The Academy of Sciences and the Parliament are in an equal relationship. At the meeting, Councillor Li recommended Lu Yongchang to be the chief scientist of the Academy of Sciences, and he was unanimously approved. At this moment, Lu Yongchang, who was staying in the laboratory, naturally had no idea what was happening outside. Point in his eyes, only the slender carbon nanotube in front of him remained. "It's really terrible." Wei Rong's voice came from the side. "It's not me who said it. Our luck is too bad. A range has been given, and we have done all the possibilities within this range." Hearing this, Lu Yongchang had a wry smile on his face. Point, that's right. What was in front of him at this time was the last one among the thousands of sample intervals. Chapter 147 Kilometer Scale Carbon Nanotubes. Professor, just in case. Wei Rong looked at the carbon nanotubes in front of him with an anxious expression, and said softly, "What if this sample also?" "Stop, Lu." Yongchang interrupted Wei Rong angrily. "There is no such thing as a chance. I don't believe our luck can be so bad. There is a 3.1% chance that we will get hit." Wei Rong smiled bitterly, subconsciously stretched out his hand to touch the tip of his nose, and turned his head to look aside. "Zhao Wang, are the test results out?" The researcher known as Zhao Wang had a somewhat anxious face. "Academician Wei, it will be fine soon, just wait." Wei Rong withdrew his gaze, and his lips, that he pursed forcefully, turned a little white. Point, the waiting time is excruciating. Point, after all, in a sense, this piece of carbon nanotube is already the hope of the entire laboratory. The results are out. 1590 GPA. Zhao Wang's face was full of excitement. He raised his arms and shouted, "Professor Lu, we succeeded." The moment they heard the shouting, Lu Yongchang and Wei Rong stood up from their chairs immediately. In order to avoid errors, the two conducted several tests again. Point, fortunately, this piece of multi-wild carbon nanotube lived up to the expectations of the entire laboratory. 1590 GPA. Wei Rong looked at the test results in front of him blankly and murmured, "Unbelievable." As for Lu Yongchang, he breathed a sigh of relief. Point, it can be considered a success. In just a few months, the entire laboratory produced more than 6,000 samples with such a huge workload. Even if there are many scientific researchers in the laboratory, the tasks assigned to everyone are still very heavy. Point, looking at the bright smiles on the faces of the scientific researchers around him, a faint smile appeared at the corner of Lu Yongchang's mouth. Point, but soon he pulled himself away from the joy of success. "Academician Wei, it's not time to celebrate yet," Lu Yongchang reminded softly. "Next step, we need to solve the problem of industrial preparation of this multi-wild carbon nanotube." Wei Rong looked startled, and the expression on his face suddenly became serious. "Professor, how many specifications of carbon nanotubes do we need to prepare?" After This incident, Wei Rong completely abandoned his old ideas at least. Lu Yongchang's scientific research intuition is trustworthy. Lu Yongchang pondered for a moment and said in a deep voice, it must be at least 1,000 meters. Also, the industrial preparation plan is left to you. With that said, he patted Wei Rong's shoulder meaningfully. Wei Rong. Although he had long heard that Professor Lu had the habit of being a hands-off shopkeeper, he never expected that this scene would happen so quickly. What? Lu Yongchang curled his lips and said angrily, there are still many details of the space elevator that have not been perfected. I don't have so much time to solve this cable problem. Wei Rong. Okay. Looking at the expression on Wei Rong's face, Lu Yongchang nodded with satisfaction. Although it was a bit uglier, he could still see the excitement in his smile. I guess Academician Wei is also looking forward to this task. While thinking about it, Lu Yongchang turned and walked towards the door of the carbon nano laboratory. After leaving the task of industrial preparation of 1,000-meter carbon nanotubes to Wei Rong, Lu Yongchang returned to the office. With the cable material problem solved, another problem arose. Space elevator construction issues in the imagination. The ideal construction plan of the space elevator is to build it from the top down. To put it simply, the prepared cable is transported to an altitude of 91,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface, and then the cable is slowly returned to the ground. The cables were then fixed to the foundation and the rest of the construction work began. Because of the existence of cables, the simple space elevator can already operate at this time. The problem of material transportation has also been solved. It sounds like everything is going smoothly. But this process is simple to say, but very difficult to do. If nothing else, the weight of the 91,000 kilometers of cable is a big problem. Even though the density of carbon nanotubes is only 1/6 that of steel. According to Zero's calculations, in order to ensure the stability of the spaceport, the diameter of the entire cable will reach an astonishing 5 meters. Moreover, in order to increase the tensile strength of the cable, they also need to add a large number of long nails during the weaving process. As a result, with a diameter of 5 meters and a length of 91,000 kilometers, the weight of this cable is beyond what current aircraft can bear. As for making a small spaceport first, and then making cables on it, this is even more unfeasible. This is completely putting the cart before the horse. If Lu Yongchang can quickly transport these materials to space now, then why does he build a space elevator? So, just like that, the space elevator manufacturing plan fell into an endless loop. Lu Yongchang frowned and sat at his desk. The pen in his hand was unconsciously scribbling on the A4 paper in front of him, making a regular rustling sound. Su Yutong, who was immersed in studying, twitched his ears slightly and looked up in the direction of Lu Yongchang. Seeing Lu Yongchang's appearance, Su Yutong's eyes flashed with surprise. After such a long time, she had never seen Lu Yongchang behave like this. After thinking for a moment, she asked cautiously, Professor, have you encountered any problems? The movement of the pen in Lu Yongchang's hand suddenly stopped, and then a long sigh came. Yes, I encountered a big problem. Lu Yongchang turned his head to look at Su Yutong beside him, and happened to meet her puzzled eyes. His heart moved slightly, and he briefly described the problem he encountered. At the end, a little hidden expectation flashed in his eyes. Do you understand? How do you think it should be solved? Su Yutong nodded thoughtfully. Professor, since the small spaceport plan is not feasible, why can't we make cables on Zuan second? Lu Yongchang was slightly stunned and subconsciously refuted. You kidding? Zuan Nu number 2 is too big to handle the task of manufacturing cables, and its weight is not enough to serve as a counterweight for the space elevator. As for the larger space plane, it can only be built in the spaceport. So, Yutong chuckled. If one is not enough, how about 10? Or 20? Lu Yongchang was about to shake his head and refute, but a flash of inspiration flashed through his mind. He was stuck in a dead end. Lu Yongchang's eyes burst into an excited light. He turned around suddenly, sat back at his desk, and quickly wrote on the A4 paper in front of him with a pen in his hand. Seeing this scene, Su Yutong's eyes flashed a smile. The next second, she buried her head in the pile of information in front of her again. P.S. On June 1st, I went out to eat hot pot with my girlfriend, and there are only 2 updates. CAC chapter 148 only war. More than an hour later Yongchang raised his head from the pile of draft papers in front of him and breathed a sigh of relief. He reached out and sorted out the draft papers a little. 0. Help me check it. As Yongchang's voice fell, the camera next to him moved slightly and quickly scanned the contents of the draft paper into the computer. A few minutes later, Professor, the plan is feasible. A faint smile appeared on Yongchang's face point. Before he could continue to say anything, Zero's voice sounded again. Professor, Counselor Han is here. Hearing this address, Yongchang was stunned and did not react for a while. After a few seconds, he came back to his senses. Minister Han, yes, but he is now a member of the People's Federation. Zero corrected Yongchang's slip of the tongue meticulously, and he is already at the door. As soon as the voice fell, the door of the office opened automatically. Outside the door, Han Kaiming raised his hand in surprise, staring at Yongchang sitting behind his desk, and then at the door that opened automatically in front of him. Yongchang shrugged lightly, stood up from his seat and explained softly, "It's just a little trick done by the robot controlled by Zero. So, how come you have time to come to me? The People's Union was just established not long ago. As a member of parliament, you should not be so free now, right?" As he spoke, he turned his head and said to the side, "Zero, make tea." The next moment, a robot hiding in the corner slowly stepped forward, opened the cabinet door lightly, and took out the teacup and tea leaves from it. Looking at the robot's skilled and standard tea making movements, Han Kaiming swallowed slightly. "Professor Lu, your office is becoming more and more sci-fi," he exclaimed sincerely. Yongchang smiled and pointed at the chair in front of him. "They are just some gadgets. The development of aerospace technology has also led to the progress of many ancillary technologies. These mechanical arms and robots, under Zero's control, are more flexible than most people. I heard from Zero that a sub-laboratory has recently made a breakthrough in holographic imaging technology. It is estimated that it will not be long before the original mobile phones and monitors will be eliminated." Han Kaiming opened his mouth slightly, but did not say anything. He just sighed with emotion. "It's so fast." Fast? Seeing Han Kaiming sitting down, Yongchang also sat back in the chair. "I think this is a normal development. Life appeared on Earth 3.8 billion years ago, but apes did not appear on Earth until 45 million years ago, and everything we have now has mostly developed in the last few hundred years. Before encountering the so-called bottleneck of technological development, the speed of human development will only get faster and faster." Han Kaiming smiled bitterly and touched the tip of his nose. "My fault. I shouldn't discuss this kind of problem with you." At this time, Zero controlled the robotic arm to hand the steaming teacup to Han Kaiming. He hurriedly reached out to take the teacup and subconsciously nodded to the robotic arm in front of him. "Thank you." Looking at the robotic arm nodding like a human, Han Kaiming suddenly came back to his senses. What is he doing? Looking at the faint smile on the corner of Yongchang's mouth, Han Kaiming couldn't help but smile and shook his head. "It seems that I have to come to your office often in the future. Otherwise, I guess I will be the same as Leo who just entered the Grandview Garden." Hearing this, Yongchang finally couldn't help laughing. Facing Yongchang's ridicule, Han Kaiming put down the teacup in his hand, took a deep breath, and changed the subject directly. "Okay, no more small talk. I should talk about business." Han Kaiming's expression became more serious. "Do you know what happened outside these 2 days?" Yongchang's eyes showed a bit of confusion. He shook his head subconsciously. "I have been in the carbon nanoparticle laboratory for a month. How can I have time to care about things outside?" "What the chairman said is indeed right." Han Kaiming shook his head with a wry smile and continued. "In order to better adapt to the universe, the Human Union decided to establish the Human Union Academy of Sciences, which is mainly responsible for the direction of civilization development and external affairs of civilization. As for the parliament, it will only be responsible for internal affairs of civilization in the future. There is no subordinate relationship between the two." Yongchang nodded as usual. "What else?" Looking At LV Yongchang's reaction, Han Kaiming coughed suddenly. Are you not surprised at all about this? It's just a reasonable development. What's there to be surprised about? LV Yongchang reached out and picked up the teacup beside him. It's exactly the same as the development in the previous life. He added silently in his heart. Then, at the meeting, the chairman recommended you as the chief scientist, and it has been unanimously approved. Han Kaiming continued with a strange look on his face. Now you and Councillor Li have the same status. Moreover, in times of crisis for civilization, the Academy of Sciences has priority control over civilization, which is also to prevent some unexpected situations from occurring. Therefore, in a sense, your status is higher than Councillor Li now. Ahem. LV. Yongchang quickly put down the teacup in his hand and reached out to take the paper handed over by Han Kaiming. So fast. After wiping his mouth, LV Yongchang asked Han Kaiming in disbelief, can other councillors agree? Han Kaiming shrugged. They dare not disagree. At least for now, we have the power to crush them. As for the future, I personally have enough confidence in the culture of Xiaguo. LV Yongchang's eyes were full of strange expressions. Well, he did not deny this. Even if Xiaguo did not occupy a dominant position in the last life, with its huge population and strong culture, Xiaguo eventually turned the human alliance into its own image. As for this life, I think the process should be faster. So, what should I do now? LV Yongchang pondered for a moment and asked, what does the chairman of the parliament say? Han Kaiming smiled and shook his head. Nothing needs to be done. For now, you just need to develop technology with peace of mind and escape with humans. As for the future, you may still need to worry about extraterrestrial civilizations. LV Yongchang nodded silently. By the way, the chairman asked me to ask you if we really encounter extraterrestrial civilization in the future, what should we do? When it comes to this question, the smile on Han Kaiming's face completely disappears. Professor, I need a definite answer. This is related to the future development direction of the human union. Feeling the sudden solemn atmosphere around him, after a moment of silence, a sharp light suddenly flashed in his eyes. Unless there are special circumstances, there is only war. Chapter 149 Dark Forest. Hiss. Facing Lu Yongchang's murderous words, Han Kaiming took a sharp breath. Isn't there any room for a mission? Lu Yongchang shook his head vigorously. It's basically impossible. As for the reason, first of all, the first need of civilization is survival. Isn't this true? Han Kaiming nodded solemnly. Not only is it true, it's quite correct. The current People's League is in the process of struggling to survive. Secondly, as a civilization develops, it requires more and more resources. At least until the multiverse theory is confirmed, the total amount of matter in the universe remains unchanged. Han Kaiming held his breath suddenly. He already had a bad feeling in his heart. So, a faint sneer appeared at the corner of Lu Yongchang's mouth. To sum up what I told you before encountering the bottleneck of technological development, the development speed of civilization is getting faster and faster, which is the so-called technological explosion. Then, we introduce another chain of suspicion. Chain of suspicion? Han Kaiming frowned tightly. Simply put, under communication barriers, we cannot tell whether the other person is kind or malicious, and neither is the other person. Taking all the above into consideration, what do you think will be the consequences if two civilizations meet? Lu Yongchang's sneer became more obvious. Han Kaiming took a sharp breath and muttered to himself, war. It's so damn dark. The conversation between the two suddenly came to a standstill. A few minutes later, Han Kaiming came to his senses and slowly exhaled a breath of turbidity. Okay, I understand the situation, he said solemnly. I will report this matter to the chairman of the parliament. 1 month later, People's United News brings you the latest news. Recently, the first laboratory of the People's Federation announced that it has achieved major breakthroughs in the kilometer-scale carbon nanotube preparation process and the space elevator cable braiding production line technology. It is expected that the space elevator, Tower of Babel, will officially start construction in the near future, and the entire construction process will be broadcast live in Addition, the first private Starship pilot training program has officially begun. The registration website, ZAO. Ziggy blinked and looked up from the large books in front of him with confused eyes, listening to the sound coming from the TV. His eyes gradually gained focus. The wait is finally here, ZAO. Ziggy murmured to himself, reached out to tap the keyboard, and entered the URL on the browser page. The moment you press the enter key, the page jumps instantly. At the same time, call. The ground command center. Number 1 is in good condition and ready to take off at any time. Bay. Yixen's voice sounded on the radio. The next second. No. 2 is in good condition and ready to take off at any time. No. 11 is in good condition and ready to take off at any time. As the last announcement fell, Lu Yongchang's voice sounded. Approved. 4 to key off. Everyone, please be safe. The moment the words fell, 11 Zhuan-2 series spaceships took off into the sky. A few hours later, major video websites and major media around the world started live broadcasts simultaneously. Hello, everyone in the audience of People's Federation. I'm the host Bing Bing. Today, I will reveal to you the construction process of the space elevator, Tower of Babel. As that sweet voice sounded, the camera screen turned on. As a Starship Reserve pilot, Zao Ziggy naturally waited in front of the computer early. Just a few hours ago, he had just registered online. According to the prompts, after passing the preliminary screening of the theoretical test in a few days, he will enter the newly established Starship Driving Training Institution for training. Therefore, he watched this live broadcast not for Bing Bing, but to observe the flight mode of Zhuan-2 spacecraft. So looking at Bing Bing in the live broadcast, he silently clicked the full screen button. Just when he was about to enjoy it, he suddenly found that the background of the live broadcast room was a little weird. Because of the camera angle, Bing Bing blocked most of the background behind her, leaving only a small part of the picture. Being a modern day Liuwen Hoke, he immediately recognized an inconspicuous symbol in the upper right corner of the screen. If his memory is correct, this should be the cockpit of Zhuan-1, right? Sure enough, the next moment, the live broadcast camera quietly changed. In order to better conduct the live broadcast, I'm now inside Zhuan number 1. As you can see, in front of us are the 11 Zhuan-2s executing this Tower of Babel construction plan. The live broadcast screen changes again. In the picture, 11 Zhuan-2s trailed long blue flames from their tails, flying towards the deep space at an elevation angle of 60 degrees, beyond geosynchronous orbit. TSK, white team, this is number 11. I have reached the scheduled deceleration height. A male voice came over the radio. Bei Yixuan turned his head and glanced at the instruments on the console. 88,000 kilometers. He turned on the radio silently. Roger. Start slowing down on the 11th. The moment the words fell, Zhuan number 2 suddenly slowed down and broke away from the main force. This scene naturally fell into the camera. Seeing the countless question marks in the live broadcast room, Bing Bing chuckled and began to explain. The mission of this Zhuan-2 is different from the other 10. Everyone should know that the manufacturing process of this Babel Tower space elevator is top-down construction. Considering that it is difficult to transport such a large amount of cables, the cables of the space elevator will be manufactured in real time in space, and the mission of this Zhuan-2 is to slowly pull the manufactured cables back to the ground, which can also prevent the cables from being disturbed by air currents after entering the atmosphere. Speaking of this, Bing Bing quickly glanced at the barrage in the live broadcast room. What are the functions of the other 10 Zhuan-2s? Bing Bing's mouth corners slightly raised, and a hint of cunning flashed in his eyes. Dear viewers, you can guess. I can tell you that these 10 Zhuan-2s have all been specially modified. Soon after the number 11 spacecraft left the main force, the 10 Zhuan-2s numbered 1 to 10 also began to slow down. More than 10 minutes later, under the precise control of the computer, the flight speed of the 11 Zhuan-2s was consistent with the rotation speed of the Earth. Therefore, if someone watched from the ground, the 11 Zhuan-2s appeared in a strange state. The tails and bottoms of the 10 Zhuan-2s emitted faint blue flames and stopped on the 91,000 kilometer orbit. As for the number 11 spacecraft, it quietly stopped 1,000 kilometers directly below the 10 Zhuan-2s. Chapter 150 Simple Spaceport. After Baiyixuan confirmed the status of each spacecraft, he nodded to Hang Fan who was standing aside. Hang Fan quickly adjusted the radio frequency band and said in a deep voice, "Call the ground command center. We have arrived at the predetermined location." Because the distance was not far, Yongchang's response came quickly. "TSK. Got it. All drivers, stop any operations. Repeat, stop doing anything. Next, Zero will take over all tasks." As soon as he finished speaking, the pilots in the 11 Zhuan-2s released their hands on the joystick and pressed the automatic cruise switch point in the live broadcast room. "What's going on? This has been stopped for more than 10 minutes. Is it stuck? Ah, you kidding me? This thing still gets stuck. So, what is Cross Zhuan number 2 going to do? Is it just going to stop there?" I just suddenly thought of a possibility. Do you think these 10 Zhuan-2s will be spliced together into one large aircraft? Upstairs, have you watched too many cartoons? While everyone was discussing frantically on the barrage, the originally static picture suddenly began to change. The flame at the tail of Zhuan-2, which was located at an altitude of 91,000 kilometers, suddenly became a bit larger under everyone's gaze. Cross Zhuan number 2 lined up in a straight line. Damn it, you really didn't get what the person above said was right, did you? Impossible. Absolutely impossible. How can this thing turn into a big plane? I'm kidding. If this thing could transform, I would eat the computer screen on the spot. Damn it. In the picture, the cabin of Zhuan-2 slowly splits from the top point under the action of hinges and hydraulic systems. These steel plates gradually spread out. Just like the solar panels of a satellite are unfolded, the rectangular shaped Zhuan-2 cabin is unfolded to form a flat platform. As for the cockpit and engine, they are completely separated on both sides of the platform. Next, the spread out Zhuan number 2 was connected one after another to form a larger steel platform. At the moment the splicing was completed, several modified small hole thruster nozzles below the platform emitted light blue flames, and the tail flames of the engine nozzles located on one side of the platform also weakened a bit. Seeing this extremely sci-fi style scene, the live broadcast room completely exploded. Holy shit, where are those brothers who just cheated me out of food and drink? I'm waiting for you to start the live broadcast. More than 10 minutes later, 30 astronauts in silver white spacesuits, with safety ropes tied around their waists and relying on electromagnetic boots, walked steadily on the Zixi version, made up of the cross-shaped Zhuan-2 spaceport on Wu Ran Bay. Yixin waved his hand in the distance and shouted loudly on the radio channel. The next moment, a hearty laugh came from the radio. "Team White, long time no see. I heard that you went to Mars and were imprisoned for more than half a month." Most of the smile on Baiyixuan's face disappeared in an instant. "There's no need to talk about this matter anymore, right?" At this time, Wu Ran had already walked to Baiyixuan. Because he was in space, he didn't dare to use too much force. He just patted Baiyixuan's shoulder lightly. "Don't be ignorant of your blessings. You ask these astronauts, which one has been to Mars? You don't know. After we became the pilots of Zhuan-2, we basically traveled long distances between the Earth and the Moon every day, either on the way to transport goods or loading and unloading goods. Tell me, what does it feel like to land on Mars?" Hearing Wu Ran's words, Baiyixuan suddenly showed a proud smile on his face. Just as he was about to brag, the frustrating drilling routine on Mars came to his mind. He waved his hands in a strange manner and changed the subject. "Okay, stop talking nonsense. Let's get down to business." As he spoke, he looked to the side. After the cabin of Zhuan-2 is unfolded, all the internal machines are displayed on the platform. The equipment inside the 10 Zhuan number 2 cabins were arranged in order, forming a complete production line. "Baiyixuan, can you hear me?" While Baiyixuan was curiously observing the cable production line, Yongchang's voice came from the headphones. "Professor, you can hear me?" Baiyixuan looked solemn and responded softly. "Next, you take the newbies and start the entire production line. After confirming that the production line can work. Zero will take over the production task. After leaving the personnel on duty, you can come back on the spaceship transporting raw materials. Bay Yixin responded in a deep voice. Yes, Professor Zuanv. 2's load bearing capacity is limited, and they did not bring a robot or mechanical arm this time. Therefore, all transportation work needs to be completed manually by 30 astronauts. A few hours later, Bay Yixin stood on the platform built by the number 10 spacecraft. This is where the production device produces the cable. As for Wu Ran, he was standing on the platform built by spaceship number 1. That's where the raw materials are imported. Have all the inspections been completed? Bay Yixin asked in a deep voice. Hearing the inquiry coming from the radio, Wu Ran turned his head and glanced at the 2 astronauts beside him. Because it was the first time to participate in such an important mission, Wu Ran could see the anxiety on the faces of the 2 astronauts through the glass mask. The inspection of the number 2 cabin production line has been completed. Han Fan's voice came on the radio. When it comes to serious matters, even Han Fan seems to be much calmer. As the first report sounded, the 2 astronauts around Wu Ran suddenly relaxed their expressions and their faces became calmer. The inspection of the number 1 cabin production line has been completed. The announcement sounded on the team radio. Wu Ran, you can open the production line. After listening to a round of announcements, Bay Yixin said in a deep voice. The next moment, a slight vibration came from the steel plate under his feet. The production line started. Because there was no zero control, the production speed of the production line was slow at this time. Bay Yixin stared at the dark outlet with a diameter of 5 meters in front of him, fearing that he would miss the shot of the cable appearing. A few minutes later, a section of braided cable with a diameter of 5 meters and a black surface suddenly appeared at the outlet of the production device. Then, under the guidance of the mechanical device, the cable continuously entered an opening at the bottom of the cabin and stretched straight to the blue planet under his feet. Bay Yixin stared at the scene in front of him with a hint of amazement in his eyes. A 5-meter diameter cable. To be honest, only when you see it with your own eyes, you will know how shocking it is. Captain Bay, how is your side? Have you shipped it? Wu Ran's voice came from the radio. Bay Yixin calmed down and responded quickly. The production line is running well. As he said that, he turned and looked at the deep space in the distance, and a Zuanv number 2 was flying towards them with a long blue flame. Everyone, we should go back. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.